I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Thursday, guys. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble, and welcome back, guys. Did you miss me? I know it was just not that long ago. I was just here. We have quite a bit to discuss tonight. I believe I have 6 news stories tonight because there's so much happening in such a short time. So buckle up, get comfy, and get ready for a good show. All right, let's go ahead and give a couple shout outs to people in the chat. Ladies and gentlemen, shout out to Miguel, says peace. Greetings, Max. Sabby, your video about Candace got a ton of views. Your channel is growing fast. Keep up the good work. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's wild, right? That video really took off, which is crazy. I mean, it's not the first time I did a video about Candace Owens, but I guess I did one hell of a thumbnail. But yeah, that one did really take off. Thank you for that. Brian, if Israel declared a new phase, then we must declare a new phase. Y'all ain't ready. Hi, Sabby. Looking forward to another great live as always. I also enjoyed your call-in show on Tuesday. Some family members uninvited me to holidays already over supporting Jill Stein. LOL, Jill Stein 2024. Yeah, it's crazy. Like my family, like most of my family members don't vote. Like this is not something that they're into. They're not really passionate about electoral politics. And that is because they have not seen any changes in their material conditions for being a part of electoral politics. So they just don't, most of my family members don't vote at all. But it's really funny that people are willing to just like cancel people over stuff like that. It's ridiculous. I mean, I have friends that are supporting, well, most people I know are supporting no one, but I have friends that are supporting Kamala. I have friends that are supporting Trump. Friends are supporting Jill Stein, and the list goes on. I know a couple people supporting Cornel West as well. So it's just really weird that people allow that to determine their relationships. Really weird. Shout out to T. I appreciate your titles, including the variety of topics discussed versus gotcha headlines only. Appreciate your coverage and style too. Thanks. Thank you. And you're welcome. I try to keep it based. Greetings, Lawrence. Free Palestine. Shout out to CBC voter. Happy Thursday, Sabby and Eric Red. Shout out to my comrade Eric T. Red, giving a thumbs up to CBC voter. Shout out to my comrade JB. I have a special announcement about him you'll see later on in the show. JB says, hello, everyone. Forehead kisses to all. I hope everyone is having a great day and week. I just had breakfast after 7 p.m. Busy day, but grateful to be with you and my sister from another mister. Shout out to Layers of the Snark. Hey, Sabby. Greetings. Karen Pine says, been busy, JB. Can't imagine why. Oh, we're teasing the news. Shout out to Hannah, said, just heard the news about Teamsters. We'll get into all of that. Greetings, Ani. Hello, Sabby, JB, Eric, and all the RBN fam. Greetings, Teddy G. Kamala ironed? ? I don't know what that means. Shout out to Karen, who says hello to Ani. Greetings, Silvio Pina. So Angela Davis endorsed Kamala. Yeah, Angela Davis has always kind of been like a, vote blue, no matter who, as long as I can remember, right? So I think a lot of people know of her as, former Black Panther, revolutionary actions back in the day. But some of those people, as they got older, they have decided to, let's just support the Democratic Party. And it's unfortunate that some of that revolutionary energy has disappeared, but people change. Shout out to Grassy Knoll says, hello, everyone. Greetings, Jane. MEHDI is a disappointment, but predictable for me. Predictable. Shout out to UBIK, Silvio Pia. I imagine myself as president, but in the end of my fantasy, I turned to a dictator. Then I finally decided that I don't want to be a politician. I'm with you on that, UBIK. I am with you there. I do not want to be a politician. No way. Shout out to Trell. Yes, I'm covering that story tomorrow night. I just saw about that federal investigation into Rankin County Sheriff's Department after reports that officers entered a home without a warrant and handcuffed, stripped, beat, and assaulted 2 Black men. Yes, I'm covering that tomorrow. Shout out to Christian says, hi, everyone. Greetings, Kate. Max says, hey, everyone. Greetings, ACAB says, hi, everyone. Shout out to Chitwin Boy. Chitwin Boy says she finally said, folks. Greetings, Tim says, like you say, Sabby, MEHDI is just like Cenk Uygur. In the end, will still funnel people back to the atrocious Democratic Party. It's ridiculous. Oh, but Trump. F that. The Dems are funding a genocide. Totally hear you there. Greetings, Anthony, or Professor Zinkus, excuse me, says, hey, everyone. Shout out all ones the same, says, congratulations, JB. I know everybody's wondering, like, what's happening with JB? I will give the announcement here later on in the show. But first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons, which apparently I have not pulled up. Excuse me. Sorries. I totally thought I had this open. Yeah, this is the thing with the live show. Sometimes you have everything, sometimes you don't. Reminds me of those commercials. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. Almond Joy's got nuts, but Mounds don't, because sometimes you feel like a, sometimes you don't. Some of you might remember that. Okay. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinator. Don't forget about Sabsters. And of course, Sabbies. Thank you so much. And we also have members. Thank you so much to all of you. Really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, I remember those commercials, and I wonder if they still show like the Almond Joy nuts, like the Mounds commercials. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of network TV, so I really don't know, you know? Like I watch the sports, I watch games, sports games, and that's pretty much about it on network television, I think. But anywho, let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail, folks, to show you what we will be discussing tonight. We have quite a bit to dive into. It has been an interesting past 2 days. I kid you not. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing MEHDI HASAN versus Jill Stein. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, just like the Breakfast Club, MEHDI HASAN decided to let me see how I can take down Jill Stein. We'll get into all of that. I'll explain to you why that is happening. And something I think needs to be said, you know, giving all this attention that they're giving to Jill Stein right now, the smear tactics is actually making people aware of her campaign that weren't even aware of it. It's making people aware of the Green Party that weren't aware of it. So it doesn't seem like this tactic is actually working, but whatever. We're also going to discuss Kamala Harris's National Association of Black Journalists interview. We're going to get into a couple of the questions that they did discuss with her there. I believe I showed one of the questions about reparations Tuesday night show, but there's something else to add to that we'll get into as well. But we're going to look into what she had to say about the economy and also gun rights. And if you have not heard, this is the big story here, right, folks? I think a lot of people are up in arms about this. The Teamsters, that is Sean O'Brien there in the yellow square, they have decided not to endorse anyone. And oh my God, they have made a lot of people angry, folks. We'll get into that. We're also going to discuss the JD Vance cat story. JD Vance had a discussion with Dana Bash about this story. I told you guys I was not going to jump on the story when it first came out because it just sounded unrealistic to me. And I said, let's wait for more information. So we're going to get into that. And I'm going to discuss how I think that is not something that is helping Donald Trump's campaign. We're also going to discuss the Israel pager explosion and also the new explosion that happened as well, which is the explosion of the walkie-talkies in Lebanon. And again, the U.S. government choosing not to hold Israel accountable. This is a big problem because Israel is raging a larger war, which is what Professor Morandi predicted would happen. And we are also going to discuss the Uncommitted campaign, also not endorsing, kinda, sorta, kinda. So we'll get into that as well. Definitely not the best day, or I guess the best week for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Jill Stein seems to be having a good time, but the Republican Party and the Democratic Party right now, in reference to the presidential election, they did not have a good week. And we'll get into all of that. Let's go ahead to these comments here. Shout out to Joseph Hamad for becoming a Sabby member. What's up, Joseph? Greetings, real Elia. Thank you. Sabby, please make a video about progressives attacking Jill. I believe I've done that already. Thank you. What it do? Please play Latin Kamala. And thank you, Silvio Pina. New sub. Can't wait for your take on MEHDI. Thank you and welcome. Let's go ahead and get started with the first story, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, go ahead and give me a smash on that like button there, and we'll dive right in. So the last time I spoke to Professor Morandi, he explained to me that Israel was going to try to wage a larger war, that this would expand beyond Gaza and the West Bank. And that is exactly what we see happening at this point in time. Now, there was an explosion or several explosions of pagers in Lebanon. And then also there were explosions of walkie-talkies. From what I understand, over 450 people have been injured in Lebanon. Let's get into this clip here from CNN. They are sending out a warning to the Biden administration. I'm surprised they brought this gentleman on, but sending out a warning to the Biden administration that Israel is waging a large-scale war, and this is going to be very problematic for all parties involved. Let's get into it.
The confusion, the panic that is ensuing that happened on Tuesday, now continuing on Wednesday as we're getting these early reports of further explosions. What does that tell you? There have been a lot of questions about timing, about, the why now of it all. What is your sense for the timing?
Yeah, well, let's talk about the why now. There's at least two hypotheses out there. One is that this is very much an opening salvo, a prelude for a much broader war that is yet to come. It is reminiscent for those of us who are students of the Middle East of perhaps the preemptive attack Israel carried out in the Six-Day War in '67, or even if we remember 9/11. I mean, Al-Qaeda had a preemptive attack in Afghanistan, killing their adversaries there before going ahead and conducting the major attacks in New York and DC. So those are the kinds of actions that usually are a signal of a broader operation to come. And there's certainly a lot of fear both in Lebanon, but also throughout the region and in world capitals, that in fact might be the case. The other option, and we've seen some reporting in Al Monitor and other outlets on that, is that the network that Israel had actually used to install these improvised explosive devices within these walkie-talkies and these pagers was about to be uncovered by Hezbollah, and therefore they needed to act. We won't know. But certainly Israel is making all the moves militarily, including today announcing it's moving tens of thousands of troops from Gaza to its border with Lebanon. It's making all the right moves to convince and warn Hezbollah that it is ready for a broader war.
So this idea to convince and warn, is there a scenario that you see playing out where this does actually act as a deterrent?
Well, yes, Hezbollah and Iran are in a sense already very much deterred, maybe not as deterred as Israel would like them to be, but we know that the Iranians and Hezbollah, but the Iranians in particular, have a preference for indirect warfare as it relates to Israel. They are militarily, and now we know also in the intelligence world, inferior to the Israelis. So they rely on a network of proxies and militant groups, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, militias in Syria and Iraq, to take the fight to Israel through 1,000 cuts rather any kind of direct knockout blow. So time and again, and as Israel escalates to establish, and I would argue it already has, escalation dominance, we see Hezbollah and Iran shrinking back from that all-out war scenario. And arguably, that only encourages Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu to push further.
So let's just comment about that for just a second. First of all, what happened in Lebanon is incredibly dangerous. The fact that hundreds of people were injured by these explosions. And of course, Israel's going to say that they're targeting Hezbollah, just like they say when they bomb, hospitals and these babies in Gaza, that they're targeting Hamas. This is not something to be played with. And they may say, well, Hezbollah is shrinking back, Iran is shrinking back. But sometimes that is done to give you the illusion that they're not going to fight back. And then when you least expect it, they do. I would not get hopeful if I were Israel about Hezbollah not issuing a response. Because at this point, Israel is a bully. And what kills me is that the U.S. government just expects all of these other countries that Israel is attacking. The U.S. government just expects them to sit there and take it and get beat up while Israel continues to kill civilians. And I don't care what political party you're a part of, that's a problem. And as long as the U.S. government continues to give Israel weapons and refuses to hold Israel accountable, there's nothing they can do. Kamala Harris told you herself, there is nothing Israel can do that would change my support for Israel. And the reality is the majority of politicians in DC feel that way. There's nothing they can do that would change their support. That is a dangerous precedent. Imagine if you're that country and you're told that by a country that pretty much wants to be the leader of the world, and they're the ones giving you the weapons. Well, that tells you that you're invincible, that you can do whatever you want to do. At first, it was all about we're going after Hamas. You're over in Lebanon. Hamas is in Gaza. You're over in the West Bank. So as I said before, Netanyahu had laid this out so clearly that the greater goal was to establish a greater Israel, which includes part of Lebanon. And nobody is trying to stop Israel. This is insane.
And Nick, I should point out all of this playing out, of course. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the region. He was very clear in speaking with reporters in Cairo when he arrived that the U.S. didn't know about this, had not been informed about the attack Tuesday. But this is also putting a strain on that relationship.
Yeah, look, it's been fairly clear, I think, since the Israelis assassinated the key negotiator of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, in Tehran, that the government of Benjamin Netanyahu was pursuing its own agenda and perhaps less fussed as to what that did to the diplomacy that the US has invested so much of itself in. And we have seen in the past week increasingly signs that diplomacy, for the Biden administration at least, might be reaching the end of the road. They're still very fervent in their desire for some kind of ceasefire deal. That's at the heart of all the messaging you hear. But the phrase, the need for political will, has kept emerging just, I think, recently today from Secretary of State Antony Blinken. And that may just be a subtle probe, not only at Benjamin Netanyahu, who many's political fate has been staked in terms of how long this conflict continues. The day after the war ends is the day, of course, when the reckoning for how October the 6th even began. For Benjamin Netanyahu. But there are also, too, I think many analysts who look at exactly the position Hamas are in, their leader Yahya Sinwar, as to his fate, too, in the event of some calming of the conflict, suddenly becomes something significantly more complex already.
Let's pause here for a second. It's just insane. And I want to say something about the ceasefire. This whole idea of negotiating a ceasefire, how are you negotiating a ceasefire if Israel is still killing people? How are you negotiating a ceasefire if you're still giving them the weapons, which I've said over and over again is BS? How are you negotiating? We got to get a deal on the table. That's all we keep hearing, right? I don't believe they're trying to get no deal on the table. How are you getting a deal on the table and people, they're killing people in Lebanon? This has nothing to do with Hamas. This is insane. So now they're like, oh, well, we're trying to take out Hezbollah too. So first it was Hamas, now it's Hezbollah, even though never forget this, and I covered this a while back, that Israel was attacking Lebanon over and over and over again. And then the moment that Lebanon responds, they're like, oh my God, they responded. How dare they? Like, Israel just wants to be able to beat people up, and they don't want you to respond. So this is insane. So this whole, we're trying to make a deal with a ceasefire. Guys, we've heard this for months. Do you guys realize it is now September 19th? We're not far away from October 7th. That means it would have been a year. This is insane. This could have been done. Could have been done.
When we first began speaking, when the news of this first broke, the attack that we saw on Tuesday, a number of civilians hurt, 2 children among the 12 who were killed. Is there a sense yet today about sort of how widespread the impact of yesterday's attack is on Hezbollah?
No, and I think that's one of the outstanding questions in this. We have a death toll of 12, but it isn't clear amongst those 12 how many of those are Hezbollah members, and indeed if the 12 encompasses all the dead and injured, including those in the militant group. They were, it seems, pretty much the target. It was pagers they were using that were impacted, but I should point out it's clear that civilians, 2 children, according to Lebanese government officials, also hit, 2 children killed by them. So
children are not Hezbollah. You see what I mean? Children are not Hamas. Children are not Hezbollah. Like, this is dangerous. Like, we're talking pagers, walkie-talkies. Who authorized this? And wait till you hear the response from the State Department, by the way, because they're going to try to push back and try to pretend like, oh, we don't know about that or we don't want anything to do with it. But this is ridiculous. Do you guys realize they could do this to any country? Not just Lebanon. They can do this to any country. Let's send them these pagers and these walkie-talkies and they're explosive. That's insane.
It clearly dragged in, hit, targeted many civilians as well because of the indiscriminate nature of simultaneously detonating thousands of devices across populated areas. You are simply going to hit people that were not necessarily your military targets, and that may have been part or an accepted risk of a strategy like this. But today, for this to repeat is just going to amplify, I think, the sense of panic amongst ordinary Lebanese. But I believe you have Ben outside a hospital who I'm sure will be hearing more immediate ground truth.
Indeed, we do. And you set that up nicely, Nick. Thank you. I do want to go straight to Ben Wiedemann, who is outside a hospital in Beirut. And Ben, the fact that this is happening not just a second day in a row, but almost around the same time as what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, it's a bit later than it was yesterday, but what we're seeing is that there are reports of blasts at various locations around Lebanon, including Beirut in the south, in the Bekaa Valley in the eastern part of the country. Now, the official national news agency is describing the explosions taking place with what are called wireless devices. We believe they're talking about walkie-talkies. So it does appear that whereas yesterday the focus of these perhaps thousands of individual blasts was pagers, today it looks like it's walkie-talkies.
So they went from pagers to walkie-talkies, and that makes me question this. What other electronic device are they going to try to use? I mean, it could easily get in the hands of anyone, the wrong people. They're killing civilians again. So is it safe for people in Lebanon to turn on the radio? What about the TV? Like, this is insane. Can they get into their car and start their car? Make no mistake, the U.S. government is totally behind this. They'll pretend like, oh, we don't know. What? Oh, come on. Where do you think they got it from? This is a very dangerous precedent. Very dangerous.
Definitely, this is deepening the sense of insecurity that was very palpable in the aftermath of yesterday's pager bombings. And today, of course, we've seen, in addition to thousands of people wounded from yesterday's, now there are more injured. We don't have precise numbers at this time. It doesn't appear that the wave of bombings today was anything compared to what happened yesterday. Now, we're outside the American University of Beirut Medical Center, where we spoke with the chief medical officer here, who said that as many up to nearly 200 people were treated here, many of them with wounds to the face, to the eyes, to the hands, and also to the hip, because they were basically pulling out these pagers, looking at them, and then they were blowing up in their faces. So we've spoken with, for instance, the Minister of Health, who told us how difficult it has been for the authorities to deal yesterday with this wave of bombings. And of course, today, the challenge is still there, but obviously there are lots of people outside the hospital. We haven't seen any ambulances arriving here yet, but there are reports, for instance, of a funeral for one of the people killed yesterday, a funeral in the southern suburbs of Beirut, where many members of Hezbollah live. In that instance, eyewitnesses have told us that a man lost his arms in a blast there.
And appreciate the.
Okay, so this is crazy, you guys. It's very scary. But in a sense, it's almost like that's what they want. They want them to be afraid. They want them to be fearful. It's sad. It's sad. It's frightening. This is wrong. And I consider this to be, a war crime. Like, I'm pretty sure this is up there, like, to use electronic devices. And what does that mean for security? What does that mean for our security? Like, you never know, like, what's going to happen. Now, the State Department, John Kirby, of course, he doesn't really want to talk about this, but you're in this position, John, so you got to do it. That's the job, John. Listen to this when he's questioned about the pager explosion. Listen.
Our sources have confirmed to us it's been widely reported that Israel is responsible for this, but notably you still won't say that. Why is that? Is it because that's not your assessment, or because you don't support what they're doing here?
It's because I don't have anything more to add on this issue. As I said, there was no U.S. involvement, and I'm not going to go beyond that today.
Then let me ask this.
Even if there were, this is the thing, they're not going to tell you there was. Remember, Barack Obama told us after the fact and said, look, what did he say to you guys? What did he say after Libya? Barack Obama had a press conference and said, this is not easy, but look, the truth is we tortured some folks after the fact. But it's not like he's going to tell them this right now. When it comes to Israel committing crimes, John Kirby, the response from the State Department is, we'll have to look into that. We're asking Israel to investigate it. Or I don't know anything about that. I have not heard about that. But when it comes to Hamas or Iran or Hezbollah, they know everything down to the detail for a fact. But with Israel, I don't know. I don't know how these people live with themselves.
These kinds of tactics, blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies, is this type of warfare acceptable to the United States?
Again, Mary, I appreciate the question. I'm simply not going to be able to address these incidents over the last couple of days in any level of detail one way or another.
Okay, let me try one other thing.
Please.
Everyone keeps urging, all parties involved not to escalate this. Isn't this an escalation already? I mean, isn't this Israel doing exactly what you've been warning them not to do?
Again, I'm not going to speak to the details of these incidents. I understand that's frustrating. I get it. And I understand where all your questions are coming from. They're all valid. They're all fair. I'm just not going to get into this. I will add, if I could, and restate a little bit to what I said to Gabe. We still don't want to see an escalation of any kind. We don't believe that the way to solve where we're at in this crisis is by additional military operations at all. We still believe that the best way to prevent escalation, to prevent another front from opening up in Lebanon, is through diplomacy, which is why Mr. Hochstein was over in the region this week. And we're still going to pursue those kinds of outcomes.
This is very sad, really sad. They don't want to talk about it. We don't want to see escalation, but we continue to give them weapons. By the way, guys, we need to have a say-so in how our tax dollars are spent. They don't want an escalation, but they're sending them the weapons.
CBS News, at least, has learned that the Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, spoke yesterday with the Israeli Defense Minister two different times. We've been told no specifics were given about the operation that happened yesterday. Was there any heads up given yesterday that there would be more attacks in Lebanon today?
Well, I'd refer you to the Defense Department to speak to conversations that the Secretary had with Minister Gallant. As I said, there was no U.S. involvement in either of these incidents, and I have nothing.
One thing, though, but awareness it was coming is another.
I recognize the question. I have nothing more to add.
So the answer is no. They weren't given a heads up prior to, which means the people did not have the opportunity to avoid it. And that is a problem. That is against, and again, if you look at the terms of war and you talk about what is considered to be against, international law, that is against international law. You cannot let the people not have a heads up. That is not right. The U.S. government is not following international law. Plain and simple. Israel is not following international law. The ICJ has implemented several rulings that said the occupation in Gaza, the occupation and control of the West Bank, it's illegal. They have said Israel has to do everything in their power to prevent genocide. And none of it matters because the U.S. government doesn't want to take any of the criticism towards Israel, even from the highest court. Our government made a big mistake many years ago when they decided to allow corporate money and lobbyists to take control of the politicians. That should have never happened. We should have never had super PACs. We should have never had these lobbyists such as the Israeli lobby, big pharma lobby. That should have never happened. Israel is dangerous, especially under the hands of Netanyahu, who's a complete lunatic. And if they won't listen to the U.S. government or heed the U.S. government warnings, if they're not going to listen to us, they're not going to listen to anyone. And you can't sit up there and tell them, don't do this, but here's the weapons.
If you're someone who owns a pager like this that's been blown up in Lebanon in recent days, whether it was made by the Taiwanese company or the Hungarian company that may have had a license, should you be concerned it could blow up?
Again, Ed, I have nothing more to add on this.
See, and this is the thing. It's a security issue. Now people are like, okay, so should we all be concerned? Should we be worried about this? Like, there was a message that I saw on social media asking people to boycott Motorola. I haven't used Motorola in a long time. Okay. So, but I don't even know if that in itself is the answer. I mean, the answer is Israel has to be held accountable. And our government refuses to do it because they all belong to the Israeli lobby. I am very concerned as to where this is going to lead. Very concerned. I believe that before we ever see any type of peace or solution in the Middle East, I think it's going to get worse first. Crazy times, folks. Crazy times. Let's go to some of the comments here. Shout out to Lawn Guy for being a member for 1 month. M. Hassan, S. Cedar, TYT, D. Sirota, B. Burgess, Kyle Crystal, Mike Fig, every leftist mafia member, all these progressive media figures are frauds. I think a lot of people, as I said before in the other show, I think a lot of people are doing what they feel is best to keep their brand going. And that's sad. I mean, I honestly think that if you are just genuine with the people, yeah, you may lose some people, but I think the people who are genuine as well, I think those people would stand by you, even if you say, we can't support this. We can't support this. And here's the reason why. I think most of the people would still stand by you. But again, like I said, they don't want to lose access. Thank you, Sam. Love and support from Denmark. What's up? It's always a pleasure watching your shows. Thank you, Sam. or Sammy. Thank you for the super sticker, Peter Pavlov. Thank you, B-Man. This is Biden. Israel doesn't wipe their behind without our permission. Same with Ukraine. Shout out to Arthur Fletcher for gifting 5 Sabby memberships. What's up, Arthur? Thank you for doing the damn thing. Thank you, Trust and Success. During today's U.S. briefing, Matt was asked if the U.S. knew about the Day 2 walkie-talkie attack. He didn't answer the question. He didn't say yes or no. So Matt is another one that's a spokesperson for the State Department. Just FYI, guys. Thank you, Lawn Guy. Wild how mainstream news thinks the attacks are a thumbs up. I know. They're all, I'm telling you, corporate media parrots the State Department talking points. Thank you for the super sticker, His Story. What's up? And thank you for the super sticker, Mullen Flower. Thank you, Trust and Success. The U.S. government might not have known about the first attack, but they knew about the second attack prior to. Thank you, Nyamal. The U.S. buys Israeli weapons that were used on Palestinians for the border, plus WikiLeaks exposed CIA malware for car computers to crash cars remotely. I remember that. Thank you for the super sticker, James Starks. Thank you, Roger. The U.S. is not following their own law. I emailed it to you. Thank you. And you're talking about the Leahy law. Thank you, Peter. You have to be careful what you buy and where you are buying. 6 feet from any electronic devices. This is crazy, guys. And thank you, Regine, for the super sticker. Base. Let's get that comment on Rumble. Let's get that Rumble rant in the house. Thank you, Mark Pugsley, for the rant. Sab, when will Hill Dog STFU? Did you ever see that one after the 2016 election where Hillary says, help, I lost the election and I can't shut up? You know what's really interesting about that is I would have thought by now she would not talk about that anymore. I mean, it's what? Almost 10 years ago. I thought at some point she would have moved on, but no, she even wrote a book about it. So I don't think she's letting it go, though. I don't think she's letting it go. Okay, we're moving on to this story, which I think has shocked a lot of people. The Teamsters Union sent shockwaves around the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, they have decided not to endorse Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Say, what? I know, right? A lot of people were shocked. They were like, what was happening? What do you do? Both parties are upset with the Teamsters Union at this point in time. But you know what? I'm not mad at the Teamsters. I'm not mad at them because I really don't think that unions should endorse candidates. I think you should try to keep labor separate from Democratic Party or the Republican Party, because then it's kind of like, they feel like they got you and they're always going to get your support. It hasn't been since 1996 that the Teamsters decided not to endorse a presidential candidate. And during that time, they decided not to endorse because of NAFTA. And so it's been a while since they decided not to do this, but they gave explanation. And I want to go into this. This was the statement here from the Teamsters, no endorsement for U.S. president. They were like, hell to the no. Hell no to the no, no, no. Hell to the no. After reviewing 6 months of nationwide member polling and wrapping up nearly a year of rank and file roundtable interviews with all major candidates for presidency, the union was left with few commitments on top Teamster issues from either former President Donald Trump or Vice President Kamala Harris, and found no definitive support among members for either party's nominee. Hold on, folks. In data publicly released earlier today, President Joe Biden won the support of Teamsters, voting in the straw polls at local unions between April through July. That was prior to his exit from the race. But in independent electronic and phone polling from July through September, a majority of voting members twice selected Trump for a possible Teamsters endorsement over Kamala Harris. However, they didn't go with Trump either. Let me get into that. The union's extensive member polling showed no majority support for Vice President Harris and no universal support among Donald Trump. So let me go into this part right here, which I think both parties need to hear. Just when we get into the railroad workers, this is the part here I think that people really need to understand. During the Teamsters rank and file presidential roundtables, the union shared feedback from members in the railroad and airline industries who work under the Railway Labor Act, RLA, and are at the mercy of government intervention that often prevents work stoppages. While 10,000 Teamsters at United Airlines are currently negotiating a new agreement, tens of thousands of railroad Teamsters were forced to accept a new contract implemented by Congress without member support in 2022. In roundtable discussions with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, neither candidate promised not to intervene to force similar RLA contracts, which undermines workers' bargaining leverage. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember when the railroad workers tried to go on strike? It seems like that has come back to bite both parties in the butt. I interviewed two members from the railroad labor, two of them on this show when they were trying to go on strike. And they made it very clear to me that they voted to go on strike. However, union management went against the rank and file membership and decided to go along with Congress and all that kind of stuff. But they did vote to go on strike. And at that point in time, they were not too keen on supporting the Democratic Party because of the way that they were treated. And you can go back and watch those videos. I brought them on this show twice. And they talked about what they were asking for and why they were asking for it. They talked about the grueling work environment that they had. These people weren't asking for a lot, believe it or not. They did want guaranteed sick pay and things like that. So it looks like that has come back to bite the Biden administration in the butt. Now, I say the Biden administration because Trump's not president right now, but they weren't keen on him either. They didn't want to endorse Donald Trump either because they said neither one of them promised not to intervene to force similar RLA contracts. So what they are saying is they don't want that to happen again in the future, right? This part is important because a lot of people are talking about the PRO Act and they don't understand why they would not have endorsed the Democratic Party. It says, while Harris pledged, if elected, to sign the PRO Act, an essential piece of labor legislation strengthening union protections, and criticize dangerous right-to-work laws that are enacted to bankrupt unions, Trump would not commit to veto national right-to-work legislation if he returned to the White House. Right-to-work laws only exist to try to kill labor unions. That's coming from the Teamsters General Secretary Treasurer. It is a red line for the Teamsters and must be for any union when a candidate for elected office does not oppose such anti-worker legislation. It's too important of an issue for the labor movement as a whole to be left up to state legislators. So this caused heads to spin. One of those heads was AOC. She was obviously not happy about this. She said Sean O'Brien has been boosting Republicans all year while supporting anti-worker, anti-choice Senate candidates. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris cast the tie-breaking vote to save Teamster pensions nationwide. This is another case that people have been making. They said, well, she did cast the vote to save your pensions, right? She says, listen to your local. They know the score. Thank you, Cal Teamsters. And she posts a screenshot here of the California Teamsters chapter where they did endorse Kamala Harris, right? So California, Nevada, Hawaii, Guam, they did choose to endorse Kamala Harris. So that's one of the local chapters there. However, what I will say here is this is not a good look. And I think this is something that AOC has made this kind of mistake before, because the reality is when it comes to the railroad workers, remember, with the exception of Rashida Tlaib, all of the squad members voted against the railroad worker ability to strike. Rashida Tlaib was the only one that would not vote in favor of that. Like she wanted them to have the ability to go on strike. I really do believe that is a big bargaining power for employees. So I remember a lot of us were angry when this happened. This is all coming back. I remember a lot of us were angry because we're like, what are you guys doing? You're going against the workers. So here I see her doing this again. I feel like she's attacking the workers, right? Who cares who Sean O'Brien talked to? And you're going to hear from Sean O'Brien in just a second. Who cares who he spoke to? Again, you're attacking the wrong. Why are you going after the workers? Oh my God. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh boy. This is not good. This is not good. Rule number one, ladies and gentlemen, don't attack the workers. Now, as a union, they're going to try to meet with different parties to see who's going to offer them different options. I mean, they all do. The UAW does this too. Like they meet with different parties to see who's going to offer them what. Now, what was really interesting, though, was that Sean O'Brien spoke at the RNC convention, but he wasn't present at the DNC convention. But then I later found out that he wasn't invited to the DNC convention. So I think that was a missed opportunity for the Democratic Party there. I don't know why they would not invite him. I guess because he didn't already endorse, because they invited the UAW. But this speaks to something that Chris Smalls told me recently. Me and JB, we interviewed Chris Smalls on RBN, and he told us that what he found out after he met Joe Biden, and Joe Biden was congratulating him for being a part of creating the ALU, Amazon Labor Union. He said what he found out after that is they wanted him to give an endorsement. And the rule that Chris and other, members of ALU set was that we're not endorsing presidential candidates. According to Chris Smalls, once he told them that they're not going to do that, they stopped inviting him to things. He said they would have other events where they would invite unions, but they stopped inviting the ALU because the ALU wouldn't endorse them. That's pretty messed up. Because like I said, I don't think unions should have to endorse presidential candidates. Now, my comrade Nick here from RBN said, the Teamsters president made it clear that they are not endorsing Kamala because she broke the rail strike, which is what I just read to you. Remember how you helped the Biden administration break the rail strike? That's the reason they are not endorsing. So there you go. And I what did we see? This came back to bite them. That came back to bite him. You can't go against the workers. So Sean O'Brien was on CNN and Fox News. I'm going to show you both of those conversations here. Dana Bash, not happy with him. CNN, not happy with him. And also Fox News was not happy with him either. They're getting punched from both sides. Okay, let's go ahead and bring in the one from CNN.
In a big blow for Kamala Harris, the Teamsters announced yesterday that they will not endorse her this year. They aren't endorsing Donald Trump either. This is the first time since 1996 that the union is withholding its endorsement. Joining me now is the president of the Teamsters, Sean O'Brien. Thank you so much for being here. I want to go back to the announcement. You said neither major candidate was able to make serious commitments to our union to ensure the interests of working people are always put before big business. You met with Vice President Harris this week on Tuesday. What commitments were you looking for from her that she did not provide?
Well, one biggest commitment is we want our members a commitment that the government will not interfere or try and impede our right to strike in any collective bargaining situations we're in. In 2022, our railroad workers were forced into a contract and they were not happy about it. So under the Railway Labor Act, we want to make certain moving forward that those commitments are met. We asked about people that are currently in the administration that have been good working with us. We couldn't get commitments on that either. So Donald Trump, when he came in, he couldn't commit to vetoing national right to work. So there are a lot of issues that are important to our members, that are important to our organization as an international, that we couldn't get commitments on.
So did everybody just hear that? He made it very clear, plain as day. The railroad worker prevention strike, preventing the railroad workers from going on strike, and the right to work. So they had issues with both candidates and decided not to give an endorsement to either one. Now, Dana is pissed in this interview. As you can see the look on Dana's face, she is not happy, okay? She is not happy at all.
Couldn't get commitments on the PRO Act from President Trump, and then couldn't, so those are the important issues that are important to us.
Just real quick, you mentioned the rail strike and the fact that the Biden administration got involved. maybe this is hard to answer, but if Joe Biden were still at the top of the ticket, do you think the non-endorsement would still be the case?
Well,
Meaning,
look,
would you have endorsed him?
Look, I mean, there's no running from the fact that Joe Biden was the most pro-union president. He passed legislation to fix 300 pension funds, and I am truly appreciative of it. And that was a problem that was created by legislation in 1980 that put tremendous strain on these pension funds. So it's a problem that they created and they finally fixed, and we're grateful for it. But, you know, Joe Biden wasn't polling all well either. Remember, Joe Biden was in the race and we polled, and he was polling about 34% with our members.
Got it. All right, I want to ask you about
Joe Biden wasn't polling well, but polling higher than Kamala. I'll show you that in a second.
something that New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez pointed out, and that is that the Teamsters and other labor organizations rely on Democrats to achieve key policy goals. Listen to this.
And at the end of the day, we know that when the Teamsters are in trouble, who do they call? When we need to make sure that Teamsters pensions are bailed out, when we need to make sure that they have a fair shake at the negotiating table with rail, it was Sean O'Brien calling Democrats for help.
But Democrats didn't help the railroad workers, though. That's the problem. He made it very clear what the issues were.
So just building on that, you mentioned a little bit of this, but I'll just give even more details to our viewers. No Republicans in the Senate supported the bill that bailed out approximately 600,000 pensions for the Teamsters. Kamala Harris cast the tie-breaking vote. No Republicans currently support the PRO Act. If Democrats are the ones that consistently not just support your legislative priorities, but pass them into law, why are you refusing to endorse and give her the really key boots on the ground grassroots in a 50-50 race?
Well,
he just told you. Oh my God.
I just may want to clean up a couple of things that are inconsistent with the Congresswoman stated that the President of the United States, along with the former Secretary of Labor, was calling the Teamsters for help to try and settle it because they were afraid that if a rail strike happened, that it would throw the country into a recession. We were not calling on the administration. We were calling on the administration to stay out of it. And I've quoted this many times that my neighborhood that I grew up in, with you're familiar with in Boston, if two people are having a disagreement, you have nothing to do with it, you keep on walking. So that statement's inconsistent. Now, she has to remember that, you know, there is a clear divide, especially in Teamster members, between the Democrats and the Republicans. And instead of trying to pick a fight with labor leaders who listen to their members and embrace their members' opinions, she should maybe get into her district where it voted far Republican, far right Republican, and maybe find out what the problem is. When I have a problem in a work site and there is criticism, I get right in there and find out what that problem is.
What do you mean voted far right Republican?
In our polling,
she's a Democrat.
In our polling,
Oh, you mean among Teamsters?
In our polling, New York, her district, voted overwhelmingly Republican to support former President Trump. So she may want to focus on her job instead of mine.
So I do want to jump in here and just say, I'm not sure what he's referring to. I don't know if he conducted a separate poll from what I saw, but I did check this earlier today, and AOC's district did endorse Kamala Harris. So the Teamsters chapter from her district did endorse Kamala Harris. He's saying that the poll that he conducted with that particular chapter showed that they overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump. So I don't know. I haven't seen the poll that he's referring to for her chapter, but I did see the statement from that chapter that said they're endorsing Kamala Harris. Just FYI.
I want to ask a little bit more about that polling. If it is accurate, it would mean that almost 60% of your members do prefer former President Trump over Vice President Harris. But I just want to give a small sample of Donald Trump's record on union issues. He appointed Supreme Court justices that were part of major decisions going against unions. He appoints to the NLRB people who consistently rule against labor. He visited a non-union auto plant while the UAW was striking and encouraged union members to boycott their dues.
So do you see what Dana's doing right here? So Dana is giving him Trump's record on, pro-union policies, almost as if Sean O'Brien's, Teamster union endorsed Donald Trump, which they didn't. Does everybody see this? There is this idea among like the two party, like the partisan, like peeps sometimes, like there's this idea like, and I get this more with the Democratic Party than the Republican Party. For whatever reason, if you tell people that you don't support Kamala or before it was Biden, the response tends to be, oh, so you support Trump? It's really weird. But like, I feel like you don't get that as much. Like if you tell someone I'm not voting Trump, I don't hear people say, oh, so you support Kamala? I don't get that as much the other way around. But it never like dawns on them that it could be possible that you don't support either one of them. You know, like me. So she's bringing up this list of his record on union policies, but it's weird because the statement from the Teamsters is that they don't support, they're not endorsing Kamala or Trump, but she's telling him this almost as if they endorse Donald Trump. Really weird. It feels like cult-like behavior, you know? It feels like cult-like behavior to me.
Of course, remember last month when he was on with Elon Musk, praising Musk for firing striking workers, you called that economic terrorism. And, you know, you do have, I understand that there is some split, but you do have people like James Kerbeam, who is the head of the Teamsters Black Caucus, saying that what you have done is chosen not to stand up to a bully and an anti-union candidate and not endorsing Kamala Harris.
Yeah, James Kerbeam, you know, he represents a certain group that's not affiliated directly with the Teamsters Union. And, you know, look, I criticize President Trump. I'll criticize anybody that attacks labor, crosses picket lines, or whatever else. And this was not an endorsement for the Republican Party. This is a wake-up call that the system is broken. It's far too long that the Democratic Party, and I'm a Democrat, has just got their way. We need to hold them accountable. But this is an opportunity as well for both parties to take a hard look. The Democrats refocus and say something's wrong. We've got to recapture American workers. What do we need to do? And this is an opportunity for Republicans who claim they want to be the working party for American workers to prove that they can do that by supporting the PRO Act and passing the PRO Act and help develop a PRO Act. Our goal in this whole thing is to work bipartisan and get things done for working people. And look, as far as schoolyard bullies go, my record's proven. We've had 227 strikes since my administration. We've won a historic contract, largest collective bargaining agreement because of our members, and we're going to continue to do that. People can call names. That's what's wrong with this whole process. People get so personal instead of trying to fix a problem and find some collaboration to effectuate some change that's needed in this country.
100%. So that is a strong message that Sean O'Brien sent there to both parties. He let them know, listen, I don't owe you anything. He let them know, like, if you want our endorsement, you have to work for it. If you want our vote. And remember, Sean Fain with the UAW, what did he say to CNN? He said, we're giving the endorsement to Biden. We're giving the endorsement to Kamala Harris, but most of the members are going to vote for Donald Trump. So the reality is here, I think this message cannot be said more than enough. Nobody owes you anything. We don't owe anything to the Democratic Party. We don't owe anything to the Republican Party. And that cannot be a better message from Sean O'Brien. Now, he also went on to Fox News, and they were mad at him too. Everybody is mad at Sean.
I've been looking forward to this interview for some time, especially given the last-minute drama. I'm talking about a chat with Sean O'Brien. He is the Teamsters General President. We've talked to him many times over the years, and he speaks his mind. That's why I'm a little surprised by this news today that the Teamsters will not be officially endorsing a presidential candidate. So I thought to myself, Neil, when you talk to Sean, ask him how a guy who was invited to speak before Republicans at their convention but didn't get the same honor at the Democratic convention could decide not to support the Republican nominee. And here he is, Sean O'Brien. Good to have you, Sean. Why not? Why not Donald Trump?
Sir. Well, listen, we interviewed both candidates, and we were seeking commitments from both candidates, and we couldn't get solid commitments on our core issues like the PRO Act, like veto and national right to work, like staying out of labor disputes and not trying to force any contracts on us, like what happened to our brothers and sisters in the rail industry. We didn't get solid commitments from either candidate, which was a major factor in our decision as a General Executive Board not to endorse any candidate However, we did a lot of polling, as you know, and the polling leaned heavily towards former President Trump. So that tells
very
you that
heavily, very heavily, John. And I'm just wondering, do you look disconnected from your members?
So the commentator is like, yeah, very heavily. Why didn't you endorse him? You see what I mean? So look at the poll, guys. The Teamster Research phone poll, Kamala Harris got 31%. Donald Trump received 58%. So a lot of people saw this and they were like, well, if he got the most percentage, why didn't they endorse him? And he explained in the statement, because again, they didn't have universal support for him. So there's some division there.
No, we're definitely not disconnected from our members because, look, we did extensive polling that was important. Our goal as leaders, as union leaders, as leader of the Teamsters, is to provide the ability for people to have a voice and to provide credible information. And we cannot dictate to our members. Our members are sophisticated. They're going to make their own decisions. But this is a bigger problem. You know, the Democrats have always taken for granted that they're going to get our vote no matter what. And the Republicans are fancying themselves as the working people's party. I think right now both sides have to take a step back and really reevaluate what their commitment is to working people. And that's what we did in this process.
You know what, guys? Both parties are getting demands this election cycle. Have you guys noticed this? Like last time, people were just like, oh, just get Trump out of there. Just get Trump out of there. I don't feel like last time there were a lot of demands that were made to Donald Trump or to Joe Biden. But this time around, I mean, you have people making demands to Kamala Harris about Palestinian resistance, Palestinian self-determination, ceasefire, etc. You have obviously the Teamsters, labor asking for demands from both of these presidents. I mean, it's different this time around, this election cycle. And part of that could have something to do with the economy. I mean, let's keep it real. You know, the economy has been rough the past couple of years. We all know that the grocery prices are still high. We see this for ourselves, regardless of what they tell us in corporate media. We can see that for ourselves when we go to the grocery store. So it seems like more people are making demands and trying to, you know, leverage their vote. Cornel West said so himself, that Kamala Harris's team had reached out to him to try to offer him something to get him to drop out of the race, you know, and he was like, no, I'm not going to sell out Palestinian brothers and sisters like that. It's all kind of crazy. Like everybody is making demands. But honestly, this is how it should be every election cycle. Like you shouldn't just vote for people just because. Get something for your vote. Okay? Get something.
All right, but it does make me wonder when 2 out of 3 of your members prefer Donald Trump. Now, it's a telephone survey, I grant that, but that trend has been around for a while where members tend to favor more the Republican candidate than the Democratic candidate, but that's a pretty overwhelming shutout right there. So
well, I think
did that come into your thinking or no?
We evaluated everything. We evaluated the straw poll, which was done in person, which, as you know, when you have an audience, you can influence that audience. We figured that was going to lean heavily towards President Biden, and it didn't lean heavily towards him. And then we did the poll where 40,000 of our members participated in that. That's a 60% poll, the other 58% poll that you see. And then we did the research-based polls. And you know, 2 out of those 3 polls leaned Republican. So again, I'll get back to, there's a lot of work that got to be done. Our members are paying attention. And again, no endorsement, I think, sends a message to both parties that if they truly want to support working people, they have to reevaluate it and understand that nothing is given, it is earned.
If they really want an endorsement, he said, you got to meet those demands. Nothing is given. It is earned. You know what? We're going to give Sean O'Brien an applause over here because I know a lot of people are mad at Sean, but we're going to give him an applause over here because that's what workers should do. That's what you should do. Now, here's something that was very strange. If you look at the polls, I was like, Teamsters showed more support for Biden than Harris. The Biden poll was a town hall poll and the Harris poll was electronic. They're in the same administration, makes you wonder. Now, someone explain this to me, ladies and gentlemen. When Biden was still in the race, he received 44.3%. And that is including RFK. See, RFK is still added to this. And so was Dr. West. They had RFK at 5.6%, Dr. West at 1.7%. But at this point in time, when Biden was in the race and RFK's name was still there, because he was still on all the ballots, Biden received 44.3%. Once Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris was on the poll, she received 34%. Now they have other candidates down here, 6.4%. But that could be Jill Stein, that could be, Dr. West, et cetera. I don't know if RFK is still a part of other candidates since, like I said, he's not on the ballot in every state anymore. But if Joe Biden received 44.3% and Kamala Harris received 34%, that tells me it seems like they had more confidence or more support for Biden than they do with Kamala Harris. Now, what's also strange about this is that the Teamsters just met with Kamala Harris like 2 or 3 days ago. Like they just met with her. So it makes you wonder, what is it about her that makes them not want to support her versus Joe Biden when they're a part of the same administration? Now, this is where some people are going to come in. They're going to say, well, most of the Teamster members are heavily white, heavily male. It's those kind of jobs, truckers, railroad workers, etc. But didn't they also endorse Barack Obama? Didn't they also endorse Hillary Clinton? I'm thinking back, and I want to say I think they did. I have to double check. Hillary's female, Barack Obama. So I don't know if I can use that excuse. Could that be the case for some of them? Maybe some of them are like, oh, she's a woman, or she, person of color, so I don't know how I feel about maybe some, but all of them. So there's something about her. I don't know. Maybe it was, you better thank a union member. Maybe it was that. I don't know. But this goes to show you something like, yeah, they had issue with the Democratic Party, but it seems like they had less issue with Joe Biden. I don't know. I don't know what it is. But I thought this part was pretty interesting too. So Frank Luntz, he's a pollster. He tried to give people a warning about this a while back. Listen to this. Sorry, the picture's small, but that's just how it is on here. Listen.
But I assure you that Donald Trump is doing better among the average union member, not teachers' unions and not the unions for government, but everybody else, the trades, the people who work with their hands. He's doing better among them than any Republican has done in decades. This is not going to be a problem for him. The union leadership is more divided from their membership, and the louder that it gets, the greater the divides are going to come. And in my focus groups, and this is remarkable to me, the union membership says they don't speak for me. And I've been doing this now since I hate to say this, 89, 1990. I've never had union people publicly say they don't speak for me.
Well, he tried to warn people, right? He tried to warn people. I think it does also say something about the Democratic Party, because I think it says that there is a shift that we are seeing happen where more and more, I think people that are part of, the working, like the people that are blue collar workers, I think they're starting to feel like the Democratic Party doesn't really care about the workers, that they become the party of Wall Street and Goldman Sachs. And they feel like maybe, at least, I guess, under Trump, that it was moving in a different direction where he did show that he cared somewhat about, rural America. He did go to the Rust Belt and talked about caring about their jobs, whereas Hillary Clinton was kind of avoided that area. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. But this is a problem, I think. Both parties need to find a way to connect with that population, the blue collar workers. A lot of it's all about Goldman Sachs. You're looking for both parties now, right? So you got like Kamala Harris went to Howard private school, right? Donald Trump went to Wharton, also UPenn Wharton Business School, and JD Vance went to Yale. And I think there's something happening, I think, in this country with people that are part of that particular class that are starting to feel neglected, disrespected, and that their opinion and their needs and their wants don't matter. And I think both parties need to listen to that. But it is very telling that the Democratic Party is losing that base. Very telling. Let's go to the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Roger, for the tip on Rockfin. Sab, I cannot stress enough how I've been saying this is how you use leverage. I've been saying that if one day when co-ops outnumber corporations, especially shareholder-owned companies, this should be in the bylaws of every union/co-op. What the Democrat and Republicans fear is that this will proliferate, becoming standard. Put it into the bylaws, but don't tell politicians. Get them to concede more by leading them on like they do us. Yeah, and I think this is a great idea. Like, you should have demands. You shouldn't just endorse someone just because. And the Democratic Party, the Biden administration, they messed up. They really fucked up with the railroad workers. And I know because I had them on the show and I heard all about it. They really messed up. And Donald Trump, he messed up with not wanting to endorse to get rid of those right to work laws. So I think both parties need to go back to the drawing board and they need to sit down and try to meet some of these demands that the workers need. And see, they don't understand this. This is why more people are starting to turn away from both of those parties and they want an alternative. This is why some of us are supporting people like a Jill Stein, or some people are supporting someone like a Cornel West, because we realize both of these parties serve corporate interests. Think about that. Let's go to some of the comments here. But that was a shocker, huh? Thank you for the super chat, Ophelia. This is concerning. Israel launches second phase of national AI program with NIS 500 million investment in research and development infrastructure. And that does not surprise me. Thank you, Cowpoke. As a conservative rural FBA, I fundamentally agree with a lot of the economic policy Trump espouses, but I am extremely uncomfortable with overt racism coming from him and his camp. I'm conflicted. Well, I don't think you should support someone if you feel they're being overtly racist. But to that point, this is what I was saying before. This is why some people have moved away from both of those parties. You do have other options, Cowpoke. You don't have to support just because and just put up with that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit when I get to the JD Vance story, because I think that's actually hurting Donald Trump's campaign this time around. I think that type of rhetoric that he used in 2016, it's actually harming him more this time around than it did back then. So that's something I think that the Republican Party as a whole needs to look at and seriously think, where are we moving with this party? What direction are we going in, right? Just like I said the same thing about Kamala Harris, making these claims that, it's Donald Trump's, Project 20? It's Donald Trump's Project 2025, when a quick Google search will show you that it's the Heritage Foundation's project. So it's just these types of things back and forth. It's both parties, they gave up trying to actually do something for the people. And the rhetoric that they used to use doesn't seem to be working the same way that it did before. Thank you so much, Kevin. George, Meany, Teamsters, no endorse Nixon or McGovern. Thank you, Mike. MEHDI is a sellout. He'd tell you where his granny hides her pearls to get ahead. Thank you, Robert. USA government is responsible for what's happening in Palestine. Why do we keep asking for itself to hold itself accountable? That is our job somehow. Interesting point. Thank you, New York Varsity. She could not even help Smalls in New York City, but was the first to jump in front of that parade. Man, F that chill, AOC, Pelosi, and D. Thank you, Lawn Guy. Who you gonna call? Strike breakers. Regine, would be great if they endorse Jill Stein. That would be a game changer. Hey, maybe that's still an option. I don't know. Maybe, could be. I personally think that unions should not endorse presidential candidates. I think they need to I would just stay out of all of that. Thank you. Where's the love? Obama blocked SEPTA, a transportation authority in Philly, railroad engineers from being able to strike. Dems going in hard on railroad workers. Thank you for the super sticker, Jasmine. And thank you, Jay Tolbert. Sabby, this could be yet another opportunity for Jill Stein to get another endorsement. This one would be huge. My mind is reeling from possibilities. That's true. But again, me personally, I don't think unions should endorse presidential candidates. Thank you, Obese Dragonfly. Thank you for what you do, Sabby. You are welcome, Dragon. You are welcome. Yeah. All right, guys. Go ahead and smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we have a special announcement. We're going to give kudos to my brother from another mother. JB, my comrade from RBN, has a huge announcement. I'm so happy for him, and I want to share it with you guys on here. There's no one more deserving of this than JB, I think. Announcement. I am happy to have signed on with Team Jill Stein as co-press director. If anyone needs help with getting questions answered or an interview, I'm one of your contacts. This account will remain my personal opinions. I will continue to work on my channel and Revolutionary Blackout Network and RBN Orlando chapter while giving full disclosure of my association with the campaign. I am also endorsing Jill Stein for president and Butch Ware for vice president. I'm making this endorsement as an individual. My endorsement does not reflect the views of Revolutionary Blackout Network or RBN Orlando Mutual Aid chapter. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. I just want to give a huge shout out to you, JB, because I really do think, you are the right person for this. I really do. I think that you are professional. I think that you're charismatic. I think that you are warm and welcoming. Not everybody is. And I think you're going to do really great at this. I'm just so happy for you. I really am. And I know, JB he's had a tough past year, right? Like things happen, and we've talked about it before on the show. And I like it when people get a win. And I think this is a good win for you. So I'm so happy for you. I'm so excited for you. So shout out to JB, guys, because that's not something easy to get. And that's not something that is easy to do. But I think JB will be great for it. He's a warm, teddy bear who's professional, but also knows how to be stern when he needs to be. So congrats, JB! Yay! I see all the love in the chat. All the love in the chat for JB. I know, I'm so happy for you. Should we give him a beat? Let's give JB a beat. We'll put it back up and we'll give him a beat. Yeah. We'll bring in the beat. Let's do it. Go, JB! Go, JB! Hey! 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 That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Congratulations. So happy for you. JB said he's dancing too. Oh, you're in the chat. JB said he's dancing too. Woohoo! For those of you who are new, every now and then we like to dance on the show. All right. Now we're moving on to the next story. Kamala. So Kamala Harris had an interview with the National Association of Black Journalists. There's a couple of moments that I do want to touch on from the interview. We're not going to cover the entire interview, but I want to touch on the economy. I want to touch on gun rights, and I believe the other one is reparations. So let's start with the economy here. And remember, Donald Trump also had an interview with the National Association of Black Journalists as well. So they're interviewing both candidates. Let's go ahead and bring them in now.
Black men, as you know, are a closely watched voting bloc. You've hosted Black men at your residence. Yep. You have engaged Black men and centered them in your economic opportunity tour. Mm-hmm. But polling shows that some Black men, particularly young Black men, are considering voting for Donald Trump, and they see him as better for the economy. What is your message to young Black male voters who feel left out of this economy, and how can your economic policies materially change their lives?
So I have to admit, I was very surprised they asked this question, but it's a reality, right? So listen to what she says.
So I appreciate the spirit of the question, but I'll tell you, I've often been asked this question in a way that I've had to respond by first saying, that I think it's very important to not operate from the assumption that black men are in anybody's pocket. Black men are like any other voting group. You got to earn their vote. So I'm working to earn the vote, not assuming I'm going to have it because I am black, but because the policies and the perspectives I have understands what we must do to recognize the needs of all communities. And I intend to be a president for all people.
I want to move to spring.
Let me pause there. So again, I was surprised they asked that question, but notice that she didn't push back. She didn't push back on that. Okay, that's not true or anything. Like one thing I will say is that she does acknowledge and does recognize that, yeah, it's a real issue where there are, multiple black men, and I've heard from them myself, that are not willing to support her, that are willing to support Donald Trump because of his economic policies. I noticed, again, like I said, she didn't push back on that. She didn't say that's not true. Like she said, I have to work to earn their vote. So that tells you right there that she does realize that is a problem that her campaign has, and they're going to have to try to find a way to appeal to black male voters. At this stage in the game, I mean, it's September, it's going to be October soon. She doesn't have a lot of time to do that, but I will give her credit for not denying it. I will say that. Now, they left off with economic plans. Like, how will your economic plans help them in some way, shape, or form? And that brings me to this part of the conversation here about the economy. I think she struggled a little bit here. Even David Weigel was on CNN. Even he said that she's not really answering this question. Listen to this.
We want to start on an issue that Americans across the country say is their number one concern, and that's the economy. Mm-hmm. A question that has been asked of you and everybody that's on the Democratic side is whether or not voters are better off now than they were 4 years ago. Are they better off now than they were 4 years ago?
So when we came into, well, first of all, let me just say it is.
Oh, sorry. I don't know why.
Clean up a mess.
I wanted you to hear that part. Hold on.
The worst public health epidemic in centuries. We came in after the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And a lot of it due in large part to the mismanagement by the former president as it relates to COVID and obviously January 6th. And we had then a lot of work to do to clean up a mess. As of today, we have created over 16 million new jobs, over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. We have the lowest black unemployment rate in generations.
Let me pause here for a second. I just want to push back on one thing she said there about the job creation. Remember, even on CNN during the DNC 2024 DNC convention, even on CNN, they said it there where they were at the DNC and said that the jobs report, it was incorrect. They said that they were inflating the numbers. So those job numbers, she's still repeating those old job numbers. And even CNN said that they found out that those numbers weren't correct. They said that the Biden administration was fudging the numbers. So that needs to be fixed.
We have invested in small businesses, and they're to the benefit of many people, but including black small businesses, some of the highest rate of creation of new black small businesses in years. We have done the work of capping the cost of prescription medication for our seniors for issues like insulin. And again, I'm speaking to the black journalists who care about all people, but in particular, I'll talk about the impact on black people, where we know black folks are 60% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes. And we have now finally capped the cost of insulin for our seniors at $35 a month, capped the cost of prescription medication for our seniors at $2,000 a year because...
Pause. I need to touch on this insulin conversation here because there are people, members of my family, that have had to use insulin. So I just want to be very clear here. The problem I think she's running into with this part of the conversation is, again, they're asking about, are we better off now than we were 4 years ago? Economically, a lot of people would tell you no. I think that is something at this point in time that Kamala needs to just own it, because she's a part of the current administration. Just own that and say, look, we still got, things have to improve. Things have to improve. Now, I am not stupid, and I totally understand that when they came into office, yes, the economy was already bad. We were in the pandemic. I get all that. A lot of people here lost their jobs. So I understand that. I think we all do. But the mess that you said you had to clean up, it shouldn't take you 4 years to do it. And also, there were some parts with the economy. Some of the bad that happened with the economy happened after you guys. So, for example, when we were talking about the inflation, that happened after you came in. We were talking about the increase of the grocery prices, which is still a problem. That happened after. That wasn't the issue when Trump was in office. So you have to answer to some of those things that happened after you and Joe Biden took office. So the American people aren't stupid. Like, we all know that the economy was rough during 2020, like probably 2020 was around the height of the pandemic. So we all understand and acknowledge that, especially those of us that live in states that were locked down. I live in Massachusetts. Like, a lot of people lost their jobs here. A lot of businesses closed. So I totally get that. The problem is, though, it's been 4 years, and there were things that happened after you got in office. So the insulin part, let's get to that. So she says that we cap the cost of insulin for seniors. Then she mentions that Black people, or 60%, are more likely to have diabetes. Okay, so unless I am a senior, or unless I am a Black senior, your insulin cap doesn't apply to me. What about people who are born with diabetes? You know, people like that, people who were born diabetic. What about people who are not seniors? Those people didn't have their insulin price capped. So I'm not here saying they didn't do anything. They did do some things. But even when it came to insulin, when it came to prescription drugs, that should have applied to everybody, not just to seniors. You have kids out here just graduate college that are barely making enough to have their own apartment. They got to have like 3-4 roommates just to have a freaking apartment, at least over here on the East Coast. And these kids need help paying for prescription medication, paying for insulin. So we get it that you cap the price of insulin, but it was only for a certain segment of the population. What about all the rest of us? When are you guys going to do something for the other generations? When are you going to do something for Gen X, Gen Z, millennials? I'm a millennial. My generation is screwed. When are you going to do something for us? Let me let her finish.
As we, unlike the former president who promised to do it, we finally have allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices against the big pharma.
I don't know why this is, probably because sometimes when I have too many tabs.
Journalists who care. Because we, unlike the former president who promised to do it, we finally have allowed Medicare to negotiate drug prices against the big pharma.
I'm sorry, guys. Hold on.
That is about, in particular, turning the page on an era that sadly has shown us attempts by some to incite fear, to create division in our country, and to do the work that is about bringing some level of optimism and, dare I say, ambition about what I know is possible in our country. And so my plan for the economy includes what I imagine and believe and call an opportunity economy.
Okay, I don't know why this one keeps doing this, but you guys know what she's talking about when she says an opportunity economy. We've talked about that before, right? So hold on.
Just some of the accomplishments. Is the price of groceries still too high? Yes. Do we have more work to do? Yes. And I will tell you, I do believe that I offer a new generation of leadership for our country that is about, in particular, turning the page on an era that sadly has shown us attempts by some to incite fear, to create division in our country, and to do the work that is about bringing some level of optimism and, dare I say, ambition about what I know is possible in our country. And so my plan for the economy includes what I imagine and believe and call an opportunity economy. What we can do to grow an opportunity economy where all people have access to the resources to compete, to apply their incredible work ethic, their ambition, their aspirations, and their dreams, and actually not just get by, but get ahead. And I can talk in more detail about it, but specifically, I'll mention a few things.
Yeah.
One of the big issues that affects people right now in terms of the economy and their economic well-being is we have a shortage of housing supply. It's too expensive. People can't afford to buy a home. You know, we grew up, our parents, where they had the ability to somehow believe the American dream was attainable. Not so much for younger working people. And I recognize that. So my approach is a new approach, which is to say, let's just take this and deal with it head on. And part of my approach is to say, I'm going to employ and engage the private sector, in particular home builders with tax credits, to give them the incentive to create new housing, 3 million by the end of my first term, and understanding that not everybody is, handed a silver spoon, but works hard and is trying to save up for a down payment. Part of my plan under my opportunity economy is to give first-time home buyers a $25,000 down payment assistance so they can just get their foot in the door.
So this number has changed. This has changed multiple times. First, she said it was a $25,000 down payment for first-time home buyers. Then later on, she came back and she said that was a tax credit after she got pushback. On her website after that, it says up to $25,000. So Kamala Harris needs to clarify to people, is it up to 20? Because it is, just say that. If it's up to 25,000, say that. Because people will be mad at you. Because you're most likely right now, looking at the polls, it looks like she's probably going to win. And people are going to be kind of pissed at you. They find out, oh, it was only up to 25,000. Because that's what it says on your website. So you might need to clear that up with people. So there's that. But when it comes to the housing issue, and we're talking about the economy, the reality is she already said it earlier on that the average American can't afford to buy a home. So it's great that you want to build homes, but if you know that the average American cannot afford to buy a home, even that $25,000 down payment, which I doubt is going to be $25,000 according to her website, that's not enough to get a home. There are no houses near me that you can get a house for a $25,000 down payment, which means you still have to have money saved to put towards the down payment. And don't listen, for those of you who are new, I went through the home buying process, so I know. I get emails about the real estate market every week. So I'm paying attention, and I know you can't get anything here for $25,000 down.
To be able to then engage in what will prove to be their opportunity to build intergenerational wealth. And here's my personal experience coming at that. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother was hardworking. She raised me and my sister Maya. She saved up, and it was only by the time I was a teenager that she could afford to actually buy her first home. And I know, and I identify with, I know where I come from.
Madam Vice President.
And I know, but I'm just going to finish. I know that so many people work so hard and should have the opportunity to just get their foot in the door. Again, so it's not just about getting by, but getting ahead. Please.
I'd like to ask you more about the opportunity economy. Housing is a part of it, as well as expanding the earned income tax credit, financial support, as you mentioned, for first-time buyers, and a $50,000 tax deduction for startups and small businesses. But I want to talk to you about the squeeze that millions of Americans are also dealing with that impacts their ability to work and make money, and that is childcare and elder care. And it's a squeeze for millions of people. In some parts of the country, it costs more for childcare than for rents. I think Bloomberg recently reported an average of $33,000 a year.
In the Boston, Cambridge, Somerville area here, it's $3,000 per child. So imagine if you had twins.
So I'm just wondering, you mentioned that in your opportunity economy, a child tax credit, but that's just one part of an ecosystem. Please tell us, what plans will you propose to guarantee that families can actually afford childcare and elder care?
So to your point, it is sadly the state of affairs in our country that working people often have to decide to either be able to work or be able to afford childcare. Like they can't afford childcare and actually do the work that they want to do because it's too expensive and it doesn't actually level out in terms of the expense versus the income. My plan is that no family, no working family should pay more than 7% of their income in childcare. Because I know that when you talk about the return on that investment, allowing people to work, allowing people to pursue their dreams in terms of how they want to work, where they want to work, benefits us all. It strengthens the entire economy. We saw, for example, during the pandemic what happened. And it sadly has dissipated as a conversation that we need to resuscitate, which is the number of women that had to leave the workforce because of a lack of childcare and home health care. And so many of our families, and in particular women, end up carrying the responsibility. Men do too, of course. What we call people who are in the sandwich generation.
Exactly.
Who have young children and are also taking care of their parents. And it is just absolutely too expensive for them to be able to work and do that. So my plan is not only about 7% of income for working people for childcare, but also we need to do better for our childcare providers and our home healthcare providers in terms of ensuring that they receive the wages that they deserve based on the dignity of their work. I have spent time with home healthcare providers, and their work is some of the most taxing work you can imagine. And I actually, when my mother was sick with cancer, did a lot in terms of taking care of her. And the work that is about taking care of a loved one, in particular an elder, is extraordinarily heavy in terms of the emotional toll, the time it takes, and we do it because that is what we do, but not everyone has the ability to take time from work to do it, and they need help, and we need to make sure we have home health care workers that can help them. But I want to also get back to the earlier point that you made about extending the child tax credit. So part of my new approach is we need to expand the child tax credit. And so part of my plan that is under an opportunity economy is to extend and expand the child tax credit to $6,000 so that young families in particular, for the first year of their child's life, which is an extraordinarily important time in their development, have the resources to be able to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy children's clothing, and not have to worry about whether they're going to be able to meet their other needs. And I don't need to remind anybody here, especially these esteemed journalists, but when we expanded the child tax credit a couple years ago, we reduced Black child poverty by half. And so again, if you talk about the benefit and if you think about the...
Anybody notice the difference with the rhetoric? Because they told us that they cut child poverty in half. They didn't say Black child poverty. So I'm going to have to look up those numbers. Was it all children poverty was cut in half, or was it just Black child poverty? She said Black child poverty. So I need to check that out.
Benefit to the economy overall. It strengthens our economy to do things like pay attention to affordable child care, affordable home health care, and extending the child tax credit.
Madam Vice President.
Okay, so I think part of the problem that Kamala is going to run into is that she doesn't explain how she's going to do those things. And this has come up even with David Weigel, which I'll show you in just a second. Even David Weigel brings it up where he's like, yeah, about that. But this woman here, and I'll get to the reparations part in just a second. This woman here puts it very well. And this is what the message that I think a lot of us have been trying to like scream at the top of our lungs, that when it comes to Kamala Harris, she has a tendency not to really just get to the point. And some of us can fall asleepy, right? Like just get to the point. This is something I think Obama was really good at. He was good at getting to the point and at the same time showing empathy and being charismatic. And I think that's something that probably takes practice if you don't have it naturally. But this woman put the nail right on the head. Listen to what she said. She said, this is a message for Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, you are as fake as press-on nails, and I can see right through you. Let me help you out with something, because maybe somebody must not have told you. I'm on TV and on every interview giving the same tired answer. So let me just help you out. When you are asked a question, why don't you try answering the question? People are not stupid. We can tell when you're dancing around the issue instead of answering the question. When you're asked, are people better off now or during Donald Trump's presidency? When you're asked about the border or your policies on immigration, answer the question. We don't care about your middle class upbringing. We don't care that your mama had to save up to buy a house. We don't care about your summer job at McDonald's. We don't care about the lawns of the neighborhood that you lived in and how everybody took care of their lawn. That does not matter to me, and it doesn't matter to anybody else. I want you to answer the question. Because if people, my mind is already made up too, Kamala, because I can see right through you and I know that you fake. But for somebody else whose mind is not made up, let me just help you out. Answer the question so that they can decide between you and your opponent. I don't know if you're just trying to paint him as the villain and try to skate by to be like you the hero or a nice person. We don't care about that. Because being a hero and voting for the nice person is not what pays the bills. You understand what I'm saying? We can see through you. And that fake black accent that you keep doing, girl, you need to stop. Because you know good and well that you ain't got no black accent. You know good and well that you was born in from San Francisco and in Canada. Where you get that black accent from? Stop doing that trying to be relatable. This does not make you relatable. It makes you look fake. And those of us like me, we can see through that. We can see through that. We can see through every interview that you do, that instead of answering the questions that are on the minds of the millions of American people who have the power to elect you to the highest office in the land, you're dancing around the issue and you want to talk about how you was born a middle-class kid and how your mother had to save up to buy a house. I don't care, Kamala. So just to recap, stop dancing around the issue. Answer the question. If you're going to do an interview, answer a question that you are asked at the interview.
So, yeah, I think that's something that we've been trying to say over and over. Just get to the point. Because you're losing people in the word salad. Granted, listen, some people are going to support Kamala anyway because they're just like, look, anybody but Trump. So they're going to support her anyway, regardless if she has plans or not. But it gives people the impression that you're not confident in what you're saying. It gives people the impression that you don't know what you're doing and that you're not ready for this. I'm just keeping it real. And listen, this was advice I got from people I worked with before. Like I wasn't always this, me like this, like these are things that I had to learn as I grew professionally, particularly in higher ed. Like these are things advice that I was given about how to just get to the point and don't beat around the bush and how to have confidence and stuff like that. But the impression that I get from Kamala Harris, particularly when we get to this part right here, when she has these interviews, these discussions, it gives me the impression that she's not confident. Now, I didn't see that when she was on the debate stage, and I didn't see that when she was at the DNC convention. She seemed pretty confident. But when she has these interviews, it gives me the impression that you don't really know and that you don't believe what you're saying yourself. I don't know. I don't know what's happening. But yeah, it's true. We don't really need to hear that you grew up middle class and all. You said this over and over and over. It sounds like a script. This is another part of the interview I want to address as well.
Last month, you eulogized Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Jackson Lee's signature bill, one of a few, was H.R. 40, which would create a commission to study the history of U.S. slavery and study the issue of reparations. She introduced H.R. 40 every session of Congress, taking up the mantle from Congressman John Conyers. This is a bill that you have co-sponsored as a U.S. Senator. Yet, this has, despite the fact that this has been, similar commissions have been created on the state level and on the local level, is yet to pass in Congress, let alone come out of committee. Congresswoman Jackson Lee, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and other advocates have called for President Biden to take executive action to create this commission. Would you, as president, take executive action to create this commission, or do you believe that it should happen in Congress?
On the issue of what we need to do going forward, look, first of all, we just need to speak truth about history in spite of the fact that some people would try and erase history and try and teach our children otherwise. We need to speak truth about the generational impact of our history in terms of the generational impact of slavery, the generational impact of redlining, of Jim Crow law. I could go on and on and on. These are facts that have had impact. And we need to speak truth about it. And we need to speak truth about it in a way that is about deriving solutions. And frankly, I think that we, and part of that is studying it to figure out exactly what we need to do. But
let me pause here for just a second. First of all, people have been speaking truth about it for years, Kamala. In fact, you should be meeting with those people. You should meet with ADOS. You should meet with reparations activists, just like other presidential candidates have done. I think that is a must. That should happen. Two, I told you guys before about the study. A study is a stonewall tactic. Oftentimes when a bill goes to a study, it goes there to die. People really got to get that. Got to understand that. So the study has been done multiple times. Maybe Kamala Harris needs to read Dr. Sandy Darity's book, From Here to Equality. Maybe someone need to send that to Kamala Harris and show she can see the data and the studies that have been done. But that is a stonewall tactic, because let me tell you something. All those other policies that she mentioned, things that she wants to do, she didn't stop and say, we need to study it. We need to look into this. We need to look into that. No, they just do it. It's only a study is needed when it comes to this particular topic. And what Kamala Harris and other politicians have to know is that Black people in this country in particular, outside of the Democrat shills who are just going to support Democrat candidate regardless who they are, I'm not talking about the Black boule. The average Black American in this country does not vote. The average Black American in this country is tired of being at the bottom. They are tired of being ignored. They are tired of seeing other groups being propped up or other groups getting benefits and getting their demands from the Democratic Party. And Black Americans are constantly being looked over. So Kamala Harris, you said that you got to do what you can to earn Black men, to earn the Black male vote. You can start with that by having this conversation, by meeting with them and coming up with a real plan to implement reparations. Because this whole you got to study thing, you can't get by with that with our community anymore. There needs to be a study. We've been hearing about studies for decades. When it come to other groups, you ain't do no damn study. You guys just gave them what they needed. So I think this is a very important conversation. And I applaud people like Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore, Dr. Sandy Darity for raising the issue and honestly bringing it to a popularity. Because the reality is this has been ignored for so long. But as she goes on, you're going to see she doesn't really know what reparations is. Watch this.
Part of what we can do right now is, for example, what I'm talking about in terms of building an opportunity economy, which is addressing explicitly the obstacles that historically and currently exist and dealing with them
Do you have a position on whether that should happen, this commission should happen through executive order or via Congress?
I think Congress ultimately will have the ability to do this work. I'm not discounting the importance of any executive action, but ultimately Congress. Because if you're going to talk about it in any substantial way, there will be hearings, there will be a level of public education and dialogue that, and I think that was part of the spirit behind the congressional action thus far, to ensure that everyone can participate in this conversation in a way that elevates knowledge about history and the reference points that have that are the impetus of this conversation.
You've said you support.
We already know this. We already know the history. See, Kamala Harris thinks that reparations would include some of the economic policies that she wants to do. That's not what reparations means. Reparations is a debt that's owed. It's the 40 acres and a mule, which obviously, you know, is a lot higher today. But that she's trying to mix these things together. You can't mix them together. You're two different things. And you can't mix together racial justice with reparations. Those are two different things. One is a debt that is owed. So again, I employ Kamala Harris to sit down and have this conversation with ADOS members. There's an ADOS convention in October. Will Kamala Harris be there? You see what I mean? This is a question. Was Joe Biden there? What Democrat politicians are going to these events and talking to that community? The last part here is gun control. This one gets a little spicy.
An assault weapons ban and universal background checks. And we actually learned during the debate that you are a gun owner. Mm-hmm. But in cities like Philadelphia, handguns are responsible for most homicides and violent crime. The most recent FBI data shows handguns were involved in 59% of murders in our country. How will you address the issue of the use of handguns? Because a push for an assault weapons ban only addresses a significant but small part of the problem.
So, first of all, yes, I am a gun owner, and Tim Walz is a gun owner, and we're not trying to take anybody's guns away from them. But we do need an assault weapons ban. Assault weapons are designed to kill a lot of human beings quickly,
yes,
and have no place,
ban.
have no place, I'm going to get to it.
Yes.
And have no place on the streets of a civil society. We need universal background checks, which, to your point about handguns, is about saying that it is just reasonable to want reasonable gun safety laws that say we should do background checks that we ought to know. It's just reasonable. You might want to know before someone can buy a lethal weapon if they've been found by a court to be a danger to themselves or others. You might just want to know.
And respectfully, we do understand that.
But you're asking
yes.
about...
I'm asking specifically about handguns.
See, this is another example where Kamala is telling them, you're telling people things we already know. They're asking, what are you going to do about it? Do you guys see the problem? And it's been a continuing factor in her interviews. And she's not the only politician that does this. Other politicians do it too. But when someone's out there asking you, what are you going to do about it? They're not asking you what is happening right now. She already told you what is happening right now. So
because many of those handguns aren't purchased in places.
Universal background checks apply to handguns.
Yes,
they do.
But in many instances, those handguns aren't even bought lawfully. Yes.
Which is why I also have been very adamant for years. In fact, I myself protested at a gun show probably 10, 15 years ago about the gun show loophole and why we need to close that. Because what ends up happening is that gun shows at flea markets, gun dealers are not, under existing law in the past, required to register their sales. And so you are exactly right that a lot of homicides, for example, a good number of them, I don't have the statistic in front of my mind, are committed with illegally purchased guns. And that's why we need to address each entry point in the issue, including universal background checks, closing the gun show loophole, and what we need to do as a general matter to focus not only on reaction to crime, but prevention of crime.
January 6th.
So again, those are things that we already know. And I want to say something in reference to the handguns. I'm sorry, what she's talking about with these gun shows and everything. But the reality is, if I went to the hood tomorrow, pretty much willing to bet most people did not get those guns from a gun show. Just keeping it real. Now, there was something somebody noticed, and this, I didn't catch this at first. So shout out to JV, not to be confused with JB. Trump's exit of the NABJ after talking with somewhat of a hostile panel. Everybody remember that. I covered that on here too. Compared to Kamala's exit after she talked with a rather friendly panel. Notice any differences? So let's show both of them, okay?
Thank you. NABJ will email about details regarding the conversation with Vice President Kamala Harris.
I just have to mute it because of the music. But this was after Trump had his interview with the NABJ. And you guys remember that conversation was pretty heated. So they want to show you something. They want to show you their exit. So this is Donald Trump exiting after he interviewed with them. So shaking hands and all that jazz, giving the fist to the people in the audience, and then standing there for a second and then walking away. Now, watch this. When we look at Kamala's exit, this is funny. Shaking hands. She couldn't get out of there fast enough. Hold on. Watch. She was like, I'm not, bye. She couldn't get out there fast enough. Oh, hold on. So now you have to see the expressions on their face. This part is funny too. So right after she exited the stage, let's go right here. Did you see how they looked at each other? Watch. Yes, he pointed that out, which again, like I said, I didn't catch that the first time around, but that was really pretty funny there. But even Dave Weigel, he mentioned something about this, something that he noticed too with Kamala Harris. He said she's not answering the questions. Again, he's typically pro-Democrat. Listen.
When you listen to Kamala Harris and what she will do, you can almost start a drinking game every time she says small businesses. Mm-hmm. Let me give you an example.
Part of my plan under my economic opportunity plan going forward is that right now, startup entrepreneurs, small businesses only get a tax deduction of $5,000. Nobody can start a small business with $5,000. So I'm expanding that to $50,000. Understanding, again, that when people have the opportunity to have the resources to get started, they're going to put the good ideas, they're going to put the hard work into it.
Describe the politics of that.
She says that. She also talks about being a middle-class kid. That's also at the front of her answers. If you look at the interviews they've been doing with local media, and they've opened up a bit more since the debate, the first question is often, what are you going to do to lower prices? Which is a very hard question for an incumbent party to answer. And it has implications that are very Trumpian. It is, Trump says he's going to do mass deportation. That'll decrease demand. Trump says he'll explore more energy. That'll decrease energy costs. Democrats can point to the fact that inflation is actually, it was bad 2 years ago. It's not now. What people want to hear is, how do you make the prices go down? So everything she says is something realistic that could survive a fact check that answers a very hard question. There is not a plan to say that we're going to lower the cost of your grocery bill to what it was in 2019. There was a pandemic. There was a money supply inflation. You can't hit the button that makes that go away. But Trump has an answer that gets him through these questions. And Harris, I think, with a different set of incentives and a different relationship to something she can back up in a policy paper, she doesn't have an answer. So she goes to a larger, well, imagine a future where there are more businesses and this starts to ameliorate.
So did everybody hear what he said? He said she doesn't have an answer. I was surprised that came from him. But yeah, this is the reality, folks. I think the problem that Kamala Harris runs into is the fact that she is a part of the current administration. So the reality is everything that happened under her administration that's on the scrutiny table for people, she's going to have to take that heat because it's her administration. She was a part of it. Versus if we would have had an open Dem primary, which is what people were asking for. And let's say she did not choose to run. It was like, no, I don't know if I want to do this. Let's say that they did go with someone like a Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom wouldn't have to take the heat of the current administration because he wasn't a part of it. The problem that Kamala Harris runs into is that she is a part of that administration. So she does have to take that heat. Also come up with plans that are going to get people out of this mess, even though her administration is part of the mess. So she's in a different position. And the reality is, this is why commentators continue to tell Kamala Harris that you need to differentiate yourself from Joe Biden. But I think what we've seen is there really isn't that much different between her and Joe Biden when we look at the policies. A lot of these things on her website is similar to what Joe Biden had on his website, with the exception of her wanting to build more homes, right? So that is the risk that they took when they decided to select the candidate and not have people vote for a candidate in the primary. And there were people primarying Joe Biden, and the Democratic Party decided that they were not going to have a debate and that they were not going to have a real, competitive primary, that Joe Biden was going to be the nominee and that was it. And then Joe Biden, obviously had to drop out. So this is what you're stuck with. And this is why Barack Obama wanted to have an open primary and was not ready to endorse Kamala Harris. Because again, yes, you are a part of the current administration. The genocide in Gaza, people are going to tie that to you. Everything that happened under the Biden-Harris administration that people have problem with, they are going to tie that to Kamala Harris. It's just a reality. But that's what the Democratic Party wanted, right? Let's go to the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Thank you, Roger, for the tip on Rockfin. One of the 3 questions I asked at the Trump rally yesterday that perplexed Trumpsters was that Trump won't be able to undo the system in 4 years. So what happens in 2028? They ain't know what to say. One guy said Vivek. I said Vivek panders, and current GOP in power are Reagan GOP, not Trump GOP, who are more for union busting, right to work, cutting deficit, wars, the national debt, tax cuts to the rich, everyone operating in the now. Good point. Thank you, Skip. 30% support Trump, 30% support Kamala. Those wouldn't support Jesus if he was running. The 40% of us can change the world. Thank you, Roger. Dems always talking about what they did for Medicare recipients. Like here, when she says Medicare negotiating for lower insulin prices, why won't someone say, hey, you're talking about doing something for 17% of the US, which is over 64 years old? If we had Medicare for all, like I like to call TRICARE for all, then 100% would benefit. Too late to get the brother to vote. We don't trust her. Might as well try to win without us. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, let's go to the other comments here. Shout out to Mohammed Masakwi for becoming a Sabby member. Give him a big whoop whoop. Thank you so much for the super chat, Blueser. And this is a congrats to JB for his new gig. Woo woo. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, Robert. Boycott and divest the U.S. focus with which the world should be invested until the USA government works for its people, not cop of the world. Thank you for the super chat, Renee Lindsay. Thank you for the super sticker, Stacy. And thank you for this one as well, Stacy. And thank you, Cowpoke Ranch. Living around white people, I've seen the radicalization over the last 15 years firsthand. The hatred has always lurked in the shadows, but they're now mobilizing against us in a physical way I've only read about. It's scary. I've seen those things happen before throughout my life, to be honest with you. But like I said, I think, again, at the end of the day, I think people are turning against each other instead of turning against the billionaire class. That's how I see it. In chat says, I know Sabby and I am Generation X and we are aging and starting to develop chronic illness. We are currently still the sandwich generation. A lot of times people forget about Gen X. Original Origin said diabetes used to be an old person's issue. Not anymore. Thank you, Gifty. We love you, Sabby. Your voice is needed. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Blue Moon. She hasn't laughed inappropriately once, though. Impressive for Kamala Harris. Give her a break. You know how hard that is for her. Thank you, Nas. She's lying. We have plenty of housing. It just costs too much to rent or own. I can't stand her. Thank you for this one as well, Nas. She's lying. Her mother comes from money. Yeah, no, that's another thing too. Thank you, Lainey. First generation home buyers, not first time home buyer. Her website says both. It says first generation or first homeowners. Thank you, Baron. She gave more than $1 trillion to Israel and Ukraine in 20 days, while Maui people got only $700 when they lost everything in a fire. That's right. Don't forget about Maui. Mr. Allen says the Breakfast Club interview helped convince me to support Jill Stein. What I tell you guys, I told you all the people that are attacking Jill, that are smearing her, that's actually helping Jill Stein. That's the funny part to me. Thank you, Nas. We childless Americans are at the bottom of the list. Yeah, there's nothing for us. Apparently. AM said Finkelstein called her a moron. Nora Finkelstein called her a moron. He probably did. He told me on my show. He called Mariana airhead on my show. Thank you, Dwayne. How about the generational impact of the prison industrial complex and criminal justice system, Kamala? That's a good one. Someone needs to ask her that question. Thank you, Buster Peak. What does it matter? This is all fake anyway. And thank you, this. Shabby, are you post-duopoly? I am, Mr. Buster Peak. Thank you, Chris. My fellow Black Americans, please take note from the Teamsters Union. The two major parties should no longer be supported or endorsed. No reparations, no vote, period. Stein, where 2024. There you go, Chris. There you go. I hear you. Thank you, baby Ethernet. Do Kamala loyalists also cringe during interviews? I don't know. It's a good point. So the thing is, like, people I know that are supporting Kamala, they don't watch this stuff. Like, friends that I have that support Kamala, they're not watching her interviews. Thank you, Red 6. Black people have had laws and policies that have specifically targeted us in a bad way. But instead of doing the same to fix it, instead they want to lift all policies that we will never benefit from. That's a good point, Red 6. Thank you, Lawn Guy. Dems talk about gun deaths, but don't care about the greater number of lack of health care or the 1,000 plus from police shootings. Poverty, biggest killer. Thanks, Tavis. She shook hands and dipped. She rolled out, right? She was like, I'm out. She said, bye. My friends like down south, like sometimes they'll say like bye. And thank you for this, baby Ethernet. No one is believing her BS with explaining policy. Thank you so much for that. We are moving on to the next story here. And this is another one that has people kind of upset, but it's interesting. Another unendorsement, sort of, kind of like. So I told you guys before about the Uncommitted campaign. They decided to be uncommitted until at least through the Democratic primary and not support Joe Biden. But they never said that they would not support the Democratic Party in the general. And as we saw, as time went by, they really tried to, I guess, push Kamala Harris to have an arms embargo, to not send any more arms to Israel. They didn't have a lot of asks, but the big one was to stop sending the arms. We fast forward to the Democratic National Convention, and one of the leaders of that movement, Representative Rua from Georgia, she wanted to speak at the DNC. She had a speech. It was already vetted. And at the end of the speech, she was endorsing Kamala Harris. And unfortunately, the Kamala Harris campaign, they decided to allow an Israeli family to speak, but they would not allow a Palestinian American to speak on the stage. So they protested there. There were cries, and they went on a number of TV shows and all that kind of jazz. But at the end of the day, I told you the leaders of that party were very much entrenched, of that campaign entrenched in the Democratic Party. And Arua is a Democrat representative in the Georgia State House. Abbas is a Democrat delegate. And of course, one of the other leaders, Layla, is Rashida Tlaib's sister. So I had tried to explain to you guys, like, I didn't think they were ever really gonna like not support the Democratic Party. Abandon Harris is the exact opposite. It used to be abandon Biden, but then they switched to abandon Harris. And abandon Harris, they are not supporting Kamala Harris at all. They've been very vocal about it, and that's why you don't hear corporate media cover it as much. But we will be interviewing Abandon Harris next week on RBN's Roundtable. So Uncommitted has released a statement. They also are not endorsing Kamala Harris. They're also not endorsing Donald Trump. So similar to the Teamsters, but a little bit different. And I just want to read part of this here. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but the part that I really want you to see. We're down here at the last paragraph. Vice President Harris' unwillingness to shift on unconditional weapons policy or even make a clear campaign statement in supporting of upholding existing U.S. and international human rights law has made it impossible for us to endorse her. At this time, our movement, 1, cannot endorse Vice President Harris. 2, opposes a Donald Trump presidency whose agenda includes plans to accelerate the killing in Gaza while intensifying the suppression of anti-war organizing. And 3, is not recommending a third-party vote in the presidential election, especially as third-party votes in key swing states could help inadvertently deliver a Trump presidency given our country's broken electoral college system. So they are not endorsing Kamala Harris. They're obviously not endorsing Donald Trump, but they're not endorsing third parties because they believe that a third party endorsement would help Donald Trump. I'm going to say this again. They believe a third party endorsement would help Donald Trump. So essentially, they're still supporting Kamala Harris. Does anybody understand that? The word salad that they came up with there. Now, I have interviewed, a member from the Uncommitted movement who told me that a lot of the members involved in this do not agree with the decisions that the leadership has been making. So just FYI. This part right here, I think, is important as well. They said, for months, we have urged Vice President Harris to shift her policy on Gaza so we could mobilize voters in key states to save lives in our democracy. The DNC and the Vice President Harris's campaign fumbled even the small gesture to unite our party ahead of November by rejecting the simple request for a Palestinian American speaker. Now the vice president's campaign is courting Dick Cheney while sidelining disillusioned anti-war voices, pushing them to consider third-party options or to sit this important election out. So do you hear what they just said? They're telling you all the things that Kamala's team has done wrong with their movement, but they still want you to support Kamala. What I tell you, I told you these people are not going to give up their careers, their Democrat careers. Abbas doesn't want to give up being a DNC delegate. Rua, I think she has political ambitions where she probably wants to make her way out of the Georgia State House and into Congress. Like I told you. They go on to say here, let me go forward to this part right here. I'm sorry, it's too funny. In our assessment, our movement's best hope for change lies in growing our anti-war organizing power, and that power would be severely undermined by a Trump administration. 77% of Democrats and 61% of Americans oppose weapons aid for Israel's assault on Gaza, which is preventing a ceasefire and blocking the reunification of Palestinian and Israeli captives with their families. So what they left out of this data is that also there's a significant number of Republicans that oppose it. It's not just Democrats. So long story short, you guys see what they're trying to do. And I want to show you a little bit further here. Representative Ruwa, she responded to the statement. This is an incredibly generous statement, and it's a travesty that the Harris campaign still couldn't meet these basic asks. Uncommitted turned out over 100,000 voters in Michigan and almost 1 million around the country. Meeting these asks wouldn't even be a risk. So she's talking about, her disappointment, I guess, with Kamala not doing this. It is a net positive across the board. Meeting with families shows care for them. Ending weapons transfer to Israel is an incredibly popular position, the legally sound position, and the right thing to do. So again, I agree with what she's saying. We're also expecting reports on this soon. It just makes no sense to me. And she's referring to internal investigations of Biden's arms transfers to Israel near completion. They're talking about that, like there's a watchdog for the State Department and the Pentagon. They're preparing to release investigations scrutinizing Biden's arms, right? So the weapons. Our job as elected officials is to work as hard as we can to earn every vote. The thing I've heard over and over again, and a sentiment I feel, is that it's not clear if Harris even wants our support. At this point, the ball is in the campaign's court. I would say, I think that Kamala Harris's campaign has moved forward with other groups. I think they're trying to win with other voters, particularly in Michigan. They're reaching out to white women heavily. They are reaching out to the suburban areas. They're not relying on getting your support, which is why, my warning to Black voters, I continue to say this, there is going to come a time when the Democratic Party doesn't need our vote to win. Just a reality. This is why you need to have demands. Because once it gets to that point where they don't need our vote to win, will they ever even engage with us? Think about that for a second. There's going to come a time. So I think they have a strategy in Kamala's campaign to rely on it, to try not to rely on Muslim voters. And if that's the case, that's going to be really sad. But I think that's what's happening. Now, listen to this part. As much as I wish any of us can fix it all, we're focused on fighting apathy, keeping folks engaged, and turning out as many voters as possible. If you're in Georgia, join us on Saturday. We'll have 2 shifts and my mom is cooking. So after all that jazz and the statement, she wants you to join her to canvass on Saturday. For the same administration that wouldn't let her speak on the stage, discriminated against Palestinian Americans, which is what happened, the same administration that won't stop sending the arms, you're going to go out and canvass for them. Ruwa Roman, Democrat for HD 97. So see, she's running. Does everybody see this? So she must be up for re-election. Y'all see? Does everybody see what I was talking about? Now, obviously, when these local candidates go out and they canvass, they're canvassing. She's part of the Democratic Party. They're still going to be supporting the presidential candidate. I know, because when Ayanna Pressley was canvassing, they did that same thing to us. So what the hell? What did I tell you about political aspirations? What did I tell you? The comments are funny. On Instagram, this one's funny, because they shared it on Instagram, their statement as well. Look at some of the comments. Were y'all hacked because you are not genuinely making this statement? Like, am I some kind of dark mirror realm? What is happening? This is so disappointment. Personally, I am no longer non-committed. I will be voting for Dr. Jill Stein. Look, these are their peeps. Look, you prove the Democrats right if you keep this statement up. If you choose this path, they win. The people who push cop cities and police violence and genocide and ignore the vital issues of climate change and a slew of other issues, those people will win. And you help no one. You're practically encouraging people to either vote for Kamala. Third party is the only option because fascism is already here, whether it's red or blue. We are all screwed. Look, they're getting it all from all sides. Not endorsing Harris or Trump is not enough. That's just throwing away your votes. You can endorse a third party candidate who actually cares about all of us. It's a number of comments, you guys. But what did I tell you? I think that unfortunately it seems like some of the leaders decided to use this as an opportunity for themselves and to promote their own races or whatever. And you see what's happening with that. So not giving an official endorsement of Kamala Harris, but still telling people they're not going to endorse third party because that's going to help Donald Trump, even though I don't know how many times I have to say this. But the reality is a lot of us that vote third party would not support Kamala or Donald Trump. Let's go to some of the comments. Jesus. Thank you, Anthony. They are pro-war NATO shills. Thanks, baby Ethernet. The term uncommitted was already a non-starter. Thank you, Margaret. Green voters wouldn't vote at all if their only choice was Democrat or Republican. That's what a lot of people don't understand. You know, it just, thank you, Gangrene. Harris versus Trump is the difference between unlimited bombs versus infinite bombs. No difference. Thanks, Robert. BDS Israel works for some reason, yet it should be BDUSA. Sanctions are warfare is the argument, as USA is the progenitor of the genocide. Thank you, baby Ethernet. From uncommitted to complicit in genocide. Scab. And thank you, Cheetah. Uncommitted movement giving Kamala a silent endorsement in a way because they don't want to say out loud, let's abandon Harris 24 all the way. Exactly. You can see the difference between those two movements, right? What'd I tell you? All right, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so, the next story is kind of crazy. Go ahead and hit that like button. Thank you. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Scoozies. All right. This next story is wild. And I have to tell you guys, like when you told me that there was the story going around about people eating cats or whatever, I was like, no way this is real. So I waited to cover the story because I wanted to get more information. And as I thought, this was not a true story. But Dana Bash had this conversation with JD Vance on CNN. And oh my God, this is a doozy. Oh my God. Buckle up for this one, folks. Buckle up. Let's get into it.
But Donald Trump is also doubling down on a baseless claim that he made at the debate that Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, are eating people's pets. Local officials and the state's Republican governor say there is absolutely no evidence of that claim, and they are warning it is actually hurting their city. Springfield, Ohio is facing a fourth day of threats over the claims that have forced a college, hospitals, and schools to lock down. Meanwhile, Springfield police say they received 2 calls about Proud Boys marching through the city. Here's how Donald Trump responded to the controversy over Haitians who, I want to note, are in the U.S. legally.
I don't know what happened with the bomb threats. I know that it's been taken over by illegal migrants, and that's a terrible thing that happened. Springfield was this beautiful town, and now they're going through hell.
Here with me now is Republican Vice Presidential nominee J.D. Vance, who represents Ohio in the U.S. Senate. Thank you for being here, sir. So the mayor of Springfield, Ohio, Rob Rue, said, quote, all these federal politicians that have negatively spun our city, they need to know they're hurting our city. And it was their words that did it. Before Donald Trump talked about eating dogs and cats on a debate stage, it was you, Senator, who first elevated this baseless rumor. These are your constituents. So why are you putting them at risk by continuing to spread claims about Haitian immigrants, despite officials in your state saying that there's no evidence and pleading for you to stop?
Oh, boy.
Well, Dana, first of all, what's putting the residents of Springfield at risk, which was a town completely ignored by the American media until Donald Trump and I started surfacing some of these concerns, is that they can't afford housing, they can't afford health care. The schools have been overwhelmed, the hospitals have been overwhelmed, and they're overwhelmed because Kamala Harris allowed 20,000 Haitian migrants to get dropped into a small Ohio town of about 40,000 people, and it's completely overwhelmed the services. Now, you ask,
but what does that have to do about people eating cats, though? Now, to that point, I don't know about you guys, but before this story came out, I've never heard of Springfield, Ohio, ever. In fact, the only 3 places I know of in Ohio is Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. So I'd never heard of a Springfield. Oh, and Canton. because that's where we went for the NFL Hall of Fame. That was the only thing to do in Canton, Ohio. Anyway, that's all I ever heard. I've never heard of Springfield, Ohio. So I was just kind of like, what is happening here? So what JD Vance is trying to do here is he's trying to turn this conversation a little bit and say, look, I'm trying to tell you what the people have been complaining about, the fact that they are feeling as though they're overwhelmed due to the migrant situation. Now, I've brought people on the show. They've talked about that happening here in Boston. People have talked about it happening in Chicago and New York as well. But he's trying to drive it back to that attention, which I don't think Dana expected him to go that way. I think she expected him just to stick to the cat situation. I think it is one thing to address, the community's resources are being drained because there are more people here now and they don't have the money to money and the resources to help them, which is the same thing that my governor here of Massachusetts said to the Biden administration. She's been asking for help. She said, we are running out of shelter. We're running out of resources to help them. That's one thing versus saying that people were eating cats. It's two different things. Let's continue.
Why have I talked about some of the things that I've been talking about? Let me just say this. My constituents have brought approximately a dozen separate concerns to me. 10 of them are verifiable and confirmable, and a couple of them I talk about because my constituents are telling me firsthand that they're seeing these things. So I have two options, Dana. I can ignore them, which is what the American media has done for years to this community, or I can actually talk about what people are telling me. And of course, many of the things that the media says are completely baseless have since been confirmed.
So let's talk about what people may say versus the evidence that you have, because there have been a number of times where people in the community have said that certain groups of people were doing things and those things have not been true, right? I mean, we've seen this, and this is not just a situation with immigrant population. We have seen this with Black people as well. All it takes is for someone to say, let's remember the woman who was a Democrat and who supported Hillary Clinton, Amy, I think her name was Amy Cooper. Wasn't that her name? Remember, she was the one that said that this Black man tried to kill her or whatever in Central Park. Remember that? This guy who was bird watching. She said that she was going to contact the police and tell them, I'll tell them that you're a Black guy and you tried to do. So we always have to be careful when it's what people say versus what we have proof of. Nowadays, most people have a cell phone that has a camera. And nowadays, most people would have some type of picture or something somewhere. Now, there was a video that was going around on Twitter, and it was the police arresting a Black woman, and they were asking her, did you eat that cat? Did you do that? And then there was a neighbor on the sidewalk that was saying, yeah, I saw them. They did it. So that video kind of went viral, and people were like, see, we told you that Haitians were eating cats. That woman, come to find out, number one, is not Haitian, is not an immigrant, and has mental health issues. So you always have to be careful about these little clips that people post on social media and you don't know the context of it. Let's continue.
For example, I was told, Dana, that by the American media that it was baseless that migrants were capturing the geese from the local park pond and eating them. And yet there are 911 calls from well before this ever became a viral sensation of people complaining about that exact thing happening. So my attitude is listen to my constituents. Sometimes they're going to say things that people don't like, but they're saying things that people don't like because their town has been overwhelmed, and it's my job to try to fight for them and to protect them. Kamala Harris opened the border, and now these people are suffering. That's what I'm focused on, Dana.
Senator, I have to go through several things that you just said. First of all, the Clark County Sheriff and the Ohio Department of Natural Resources reviewed 11 months of 911 calls. They only identified 2 instances of people alleging Haitians were taking geese out of parks. They found 0 evidence to substantiate those claims. Also, other evidence that you have talked about, even you've retweeted alleged evidence, are unsourced social media videos from a different city, apparently no connection to Haitians. And this is from a conservative activist who offered a $5,000 reward for such things. And then going just backly to the schools and the hospitals and so forth being overwhelmed, nobody is disputing that the town of Springfield, Ohio, needs help. But you're not just a bystander, you're the senator from Ohio. So instead of saying things that are wrong and actually causing the hospitals, the schools, the government buildings to be evacuated because of bomb threats, because of the cats and dogs thing, why not actually be constructive in helping to better integrate them into the community? Because there are a lot of employers there who say that the Haitian workers are helping fill jobs that they need desperately filled.
Let me pause. There's a number of things I want to address that she said there. But yeah, Lee Ford said, oh shit, Dana did her homework. She did on this one, right? I know, I was surprised. I was like, oh, okay. Maybe she's been paying attention to what people have been saying. Like, you need to look up some things first. So a number of things that I want to address there. Number one, she mentioned the job issue, and she said that they are filling jobs there that they desperately need filled. This is what I was saying before about the labor issue. And remember, when it comes to labor, a lot of these CEOs and these managers, they are less likely to pay migrants the wage that they would pay us. So they have a population there in Springfield, Ohio, that they're like, oh, this is cheap labor. We can hire them and I don't have to pay them as much as I pay you guys. So that's another thing. And that's another discussion that we need to have as well. Like, you literally have workers fighting against each other for pay. And that's the way the corporations want it. And that's the way the billionaires want it. But that's a number of things. But I was surprised. That Dana actually looked into this further than I thought she would. Now, the bomb threat situation, this is where these things can go like crazy, right? Because like I said, there was that one video that I saw circulating around on Twitter, and people like lost their shit, didn't have all the information. Then the information came out later that woman was not Haitian. She was not an immigrant, and she had serious mental health issues. So there was all those things that were happening. And then now there are bomb threats being made towards a population of people that have been accused for eating a cat and all this kind of stuff. And that's the danger with that. So one of the things I will say with Trump's campaign, what worked for him in 2016 is not working this time around. I think a lot of Americans are over it. I think a lot of them are like, look, stop it. Stop dividing us with the culture war issues. And I think that's what I'm hearing from most people. Most people are like, look, I want to know how you're going to fix my pocket. I want to know, like, how are you going to help me get more food on the table, get rid of these high grocery prices? I want to know the basic economic issues, what you are going to do with that. So I think that the culture war stuff that Donald Trump, that worked for him in 2016 does not work this time around. And I think it is a mistake of his campaign to spend so much time focusing on those issues instead of focusing on the number one issue for people is the economy. Gaza isn't even the number one issue. I think when I looked at the poll, Gaza was like number 2 or number 3. But the number one issue for people is the economy, which is what they should be focusing on. Not no damn cats.
Dana, first of all, let me just respond to a couple of things that you said, but I want to start with something you said, which I think is frankly disgusting and is more appropriate for a Democratic propagandist than it is for an American journalist. There is nothing that I have said that has led to threats against these hospitals. These hospitals, the bomb threats and so forth, it's disgusting. The violence is disgusting. We condemn it. We condemn all violence.
Senator,
and
this
threats
happened
of violence.
after you and
But to
President
say-
Trump
no,
were
Dana,
on the debate
to say-
stage, said
Dana,
that cats and dogs
you
were
asked,
being eaten.
You asked a question,
And
Dana,
after
and I'm going
that-
to go ahead and answer it.
but after that, they were
What we have said is that this town has suffered terribly under the policies of Kamala Harris. Now, you just accused me of inciting violence against the community when all that I've done is surface the complaints of my constituents, people who are suffering because of Kamala Harris's policies. Are we not allowed to talk about these problems because some psychopaths are threatening violence? We can condemn the violence on the one hand, but also talk about the terrible consequences of Kamala Harris's open border on the other hand. Now,
But it's the way that you're going about talking about it. It's the way that you're going about, again, if you want to focus on, okay, listen, we're having a immigration issue in this country. We need to address this. Some of these towns are saying that their resources are being stretched and we really need to have this conversation. If you want to do that, that's one thing, and focusing on that. But now you didn't add it in people eating cats and dogs and shit. Like what? Why you got to add that to it? Like, that's the thing. And that takes the seriousness away from the message. And it's like I said, when Kamala Harris says Donald Trump's Project 2025, a quick Google search will show you that Project 2025 is a part of the Heritage Foundation. The same Heritage Foundation, by the way, that adopted Romney Care. You know, Romney Care, the same plan that Obama, developed Obamacare from, that was Romney Care. That's where that came from. So both parties are doing this. You guys are making a lot of exaggerations, or you're just flat out lying about things that are so easily debunked. And then people wonder why. You wonder why some of us vote third party. What a mess.
Let me just fact check a couple of other things that you said, Dana, because it's important. You said that all of these migrants are in the country legally. They are in the country through what's called temporary protective status.
Right.
That is when Kamala Harris waved a magic amnesty wand, taking people and giving them legal status. That is not to say that they're here legally. That is a terrible indictment of her amnesty policies that have further opened the border and further
but it's
caused
not illegal.
terrible migration into this country.
You might not agree with the policy, and obviously you don't, which is totally fair and legitimate. There are policy disagreements all the time. But the fact is, it is the law, because President Biden
the point
and
is,
Vice
Dana,
President Harris are. But I don't want to frankly go down this conversation about policy,
Dana,
because
you made a point. You don't. I agree. You don't want to talk about policy.
No,
Dana,
what I
want to
talk about. What I want to talk about
instead of about the fact,
Senator,
that Kamala
it was
Harris,
your
Dana,
distraction.
Granted amnesty.
You were the
at
one
a mass
who started
level.
talking
She
about
granted
eating
amnesty
dogs
at a
and
mass
cats.
level.
You were the one who
Dana,
brought this
my
up.
constituents
The president
were the
said
ones
it to
who talked about
60
eating
million
dog and
people.
cats, and I talked about it because you were ignoring this community. My constituents talked about
Have
it.
you
And
been
it is
to
my
Springfield?
responsibility to surface their concerns when the American media
Have you been to
ignores it.
Springfield?
Dana, I've been to Springfield probably 100 times in my life.
How about
I've taken my
recently,
children
since
to
you've
get
heard
ice
this?
cream at Young's Jersey Dairy.
Have you heard recently since you've gotten these calls?
Have I been in the last 4 days?
No,
no,
I'm
I haven't
talking
been in
about
the last 4 days, but I've
since
talked
you've
to a lot
gotten
of
these
people in
calls from the
Springfield, Dana,
constituents.
and they're telling me this stuff is happening. Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then let me answer them, or would you like to debate me on these topics? I noticed that when you had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you gave them multiple choice answers to the questions that you asked, and you allowed them to answer the questions. I'm happy to be here to talk about policy, but if you're going to interrupt me every single time that I open my mouth, then why am I even doing this? So please ask a question, and I'd ask you to be polite enough to let me answer it.
Yes,
This is what happens when you have partisan media, though. This is what happens. And the same thing happens when a Democrat goes on to Sean Hannity. Actually, Sean Hannity interrupts everyone.
I am, and I think that if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz were making unsubstantiated claims that had racist undertones about people eating dogs and cats, and they didn't answer the questions about that, then I would have similar interactions with them.
But you didn't seem to push back much when Biden had racist undertones, when he made comments where he said that if you gotta think about whether or not you're going to vote for me or Trump, you ain't black. You didn't really think about that. What about when Joe Biden had that call with civil rights leaders and Joe Biden said, no, we're not going to do anything. Like, we don't have time for this. Nothing's going to happen right now. Now is not the time. So it's still partisan. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's still partisan.
As you know, I am very grateful that you come on the show, as I am for other Republicans. But this is something that you're hearing from constituents. I did a lot of reporting. I talked to people in Ohio over the weekend, and they're really worried about these claims. The policies, yes, I am agreeing with you that what I heard is that there is concern that these migrants, there's a lot of them, and the integration isn't being done fast enough and well enough. And that's a totally legitimate conversation. But there are other conversations that are happening.
But the integration, you know, not being done well enough and fast enough, should that be put on those city leaders who don't have the resources to do that? Like I said, here in my state, they reached out. They said they reached out to the Biden administration multiple times and there was no response. So it's really a lot, I think, to ask of these local mayors and city leaders to just fix this with whatever resources that they have when they don't have as much resources as you think that they would. So it seems like you should also ask that question to the Biden administration, which you won't. You won't, Dana. I am hoping that we are moving to a different place in this country and we are focusing on more important issues and not just like, again, like I said, I think those are two different situations. And I do think that the Biden administration, Kamala is assigned to the border. That was her assignment. And I do think they need to explain what happened. They need to like you can't say, oh, I'm going to be hawkish on the border when I become president when you are assigned to it now and these things have happened. So the Biden administration needs to explain what happened. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Egg. You absolutely have a point about the DNC one day not needing the black vote, and that's their goal. That way, they'll never have to confront red. There you go. They'll never have to confront reparations. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. You really have to have demands. Ashura, the Haitian racist story was by the Blood Patriots, a neo-Nazi group. Wow. Thank you, Resurrectmans. Trump's Willie Horton moment with the migrants. Thank you, Robert. Sabby, should the people in the world outside the USA against genocide boycott and divest our country because of the actions of our government? If not, why? That's a good question. I don't think they will. I don't think they will. That's the thing. We're the ones that always put sanctions on everyone else. Dre, when Trump said black jobs, he meant that's who occupies the majority of entry-level service sector jobs. Black workers with those jobs are about to be unemployed and Dems don't have a plan to fix it. It's a mess, man. Thank you, Sparky. I'd much rather have Haitian immigrants in the U.S. than their upcoming deluge of Ukrainian Nazi refugees who will push their sick ideology. Thank you for this one as well, Sparky. Sabby, do you think if Trump picked Tulsi instead of Vance, that Kamala would still have been the Democrat candidate? Tulsi destroyed her back in 2020. That's a tough question. I don't know. I mean, remember, Biden didn't want to drop out. Democrat leadership told him to drop out. But that's a tough question. I don't know. It would have been hard to look over her, though. So they should have just had an open primary, which is what some people were trying to do earlier on. Let's get the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Based. Thank you for the tip, Roger. 2 things about Dems won't need our votes in order to win. Non-white groups with lower population. Dems still give them more than what they give us. So that shows you it's not really about the vote, but about leverage outside of the vote. Number 2, all the more reason to abolish all political parties this way. Those we put in will have the interests of constituents over a party's interests. Change the dynamic. And thank you for this. Servicing constituents, are we? So you and Sherrod are up for election right now. We'd like to know, how do the residents of East Palestine feel about you servicing them? Ooh, that, you know what? That I'm surprised she didn't ask about East Palestine, Ohio. Okay, let's go to our final story here, ladies and gentlemen. MEHDI HASAN interviewed Jill Stein and her running mate Butch Ware. And much like the Breakfast Club interview, this interview was more of an attack dog from MEHDI Hasan. Now, I do have to let everyone know, a lot of people may not be aware of this. This interview was recorded prior to the Breakfast Club interview, while it was released after. The interview actually occurred prior. So by the time they got to the Breakfast Club, Jill and Butch kind of was, ready to go. Now I have a couple of clips from the interview that I can share. Unfortunately, MEHDI Hasan put this interview behind a paywall. He put it behind a paywall. Now, why would you put an interview of a presidential candidate behind a paywall? That doesn't make any sense, right? Unless you're trying to control the narrative. So here is a part from that interview I want to share where he's basically trying to use the same old, I'm going to paint Jill Stein as a Putin puppet or Russian asset narrative. Watch this.
We looked at your social media and you haven't done that many posts specifically calling out Russian attacks on civilian areas. You haven't called Vladimir Putin a war criminal, but you have called Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal.
No, actually we did.
Yeah.
In my very first remarks about the Ukraine war, we condemned...
Vladimir Putin's a war criminal.
Yes, we did.
And Bashar al-Assad's a war criminal.
So let me show you what he's doing, right? So he said she refused to call Vladimir Putin a war criminal. Then she explains that she did. And he cuts her off immediately. He cuts her off twice. Then he tries to deflect to Assad. Watch.
You haven't done that many posts specifically calling out Russian attacks on civilian areas. You haven't called Vladimir Putin a war criminal, but you have called Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal.
No, actually we did.
Yeah.
In my very first remarks about the Ukraine war, we condemned...
Vladimir Putin's a war criminal.
Yeah.
Yes. So Jill spoke at the Rage Against the War Machine rally, and she was one of the main speakers. And she made it very clear that Vladimir Putin was wrong to invade Ukraine. And she's not the only one on the left who has made this statement. I mean, Aaron Mate, who is very good about the Ukraine war, has also said that Vladimir Putin was wrong to invade. So do you see how they're really trying to make the Russia asset thing about Jill Stein stick? Like, this is so pathetic and sad. And it's such a Democrat shill strategy. This is something that they'll do. Anybody who's outside of the fray, you don't want to support them or you got criticism of them. First, they'll try to smear you as right wing. Then when that doesn't work, then they'll try to say you're a Putin asset. Then they'll try to say you're being paid off by Russia. Like, these people, it's a fucking cult. It comes across like a cult. And then people wonder why. You wonder why. I want nothing to do with those parties because it feels like a cult. Once you are with them and going along with what they want to do, like we were part of the Bernie movement, they were all for you because Bernie was running the Democratic Party. And even Democrats still were kind of angry toward us because they were like, how dare you guys try to take this from Hillary or try to take this from Biden? It's a freaking cult.
Yes, we did.
And Bashar al-Assad's a war criminal.
Yes, in so many words. Yes, we have said as much.
See? So it's let me just bombard you with other. So now he brings up Assad. First, he brought up Putin and she said, yes, we have said that. Now he's going to bring up Assad to throw you off, right? Let's continue.
So
you called Netanyahu one, which I think he is.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
Is Putin a war criminal?
So what we said about Putin was that his invasion of Ukraine is criminal. It's a criminal and murderous war.
And he's a war criminal who should be on trial.
Well, by implication.
You're struggling here to say something very simple. This is why people have...
This is an interrogation. This is not an interview. This is the same thing that Angela did. Now, I think because they had the practice with MEHDI prior to the Breakfast Club interview, by the time they got to Angela, they were ready. You see what I'm saying? But this isn't an interview. And I'm going to show you how he treated her versus how he treats other people.
Well, by implication.
You're struggling here to say something very simple. This is why people have their doubts about you in Russia.
Well,
why is Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal but not Vladimir Putin?
Well, as John F. Kennedy said, we must not be afraid to, we must not negotiate out of fear, and we must not fear to negotiate. So if you want to be an effective world leader, you don't start by name calling and hurling
So
epithets.
how will President Stein negotiate with Israel then if you've called Netanyahu a war criminal?
Well, because he very clearly is a war
so Putin
criminal.
clearly isn't a war criminal.
Well, we don't have a decision.
Now he's jumping back to Putin. So you see what he's doing? They were just talking about Assad, right? And now he's like jumping back to Putin. So this is an interrogation tactic. So the question that I have is, Jill Stein having an interview or is she on trial? This interview for MEHDI Hasan was not done in good faith. This was done for MEHDI Hasan to try to take Jill Stein down. Let me let them finish. Sorry.
If you've called Netanyahu a war criminal.
Well, because he very clearly is a war
so Putin
criminal.
clearly isn't a war criminal.
Well, we don't have a decision, put it this way, by the International Criminal Court.
Yes, we do.
Yes,
actually,
for his arrest.
Actually, you're wrong. There's an arrest
and
warrant for Putin. There isn't yet an arrest warrant for Netanyahu. So why is Putin not a war criminal, but Netanyahu is?
Yeah.
I think they both are.
Let me say this. We are sponsoring that war. We are sponsoring Netanyahu.
That's our war.
He is our dog in this fight. That is why we have a responsibility.
No disagreement
to
from me
pull
at
him
all.
back.
But that
With
does
Russia,
not answer my question.
With Russia, it's
whether we
far more
sponsor them or not
complicated.
is irrelevant. Either you're a war criminal or you're not. Is Vladimir Putin a war criminal?
In so many words, yes, he is.
I don't know what so many words are. Butch, is Vladimir Putin a war criminal?
Let me say that whatever you think he is, if you want to pull
it doesn't
him
matter what I
back.
think. I'm asking what you think. You're running for president.
If you
I'm
are
not.
a world leader, you don't begin your conversation by calling someone a war criminal unless
So why
you
have you called
a
Biden
clear,
and Netanyahu war criminals?
Because we have a clear strategy and we
Doesn't
have
make
a
any sense to
very
me.
strong
Butch,
support
is
across the
Bashar
world
al-Assad and Vladimir
community.
Putin war criminals in your view?
So you can see how this went, right? So do you see what he does? See how he talks really fast and you start to answer a question and he doesn't let you finish answering it? Very nasty, very rude. And then he put the full interview behind a paywall. Now, Jill and I have some disagreements when it comes to Assad, because one thing I will say is I think that Jill Stein should look at Aaron Mate's his report that about the OPCW whistleblower report. I think that she should read Aaron Mate's work about that. Aaron Mate, has covered Syria extensively, and he received an award for his coverage on that. So I will say when it comes to that, again, I don't feel like he let her fully respond to things. He kept jumping in or whatever. But I figured he was just going to go attack mode anyway. But I will say, I think that when it comes to Assad, I think that she should look over that OPCW report that Aaron Mate did, because Aaron Mate was able to show these claims that they said, well, Assad chemically attacked his own people. Aaron Mate was able to show that that was not true. So I think when it comes to Syria, it can get somewhat complicated. And I think I would advise the Jill Stein campaign, I would advise them to please read, Aaron Mate's reporting on Syria. And you can also talk to Margaret Kimberly. I believe Margaret Kimberly is going to be coming on RBN to talk about this. So that is one area where I would say I think they need to look into that a little bit further. Now, here's another clip. And this was kind of like a mesh of it. Like I said, I told you it's behind a paywall. So this is all I got, you guys. So watch this.
Every vote that's cast for Kamala Harris or for Donald Trump is an endorsement of genocide. It is an affirmation of genocide.
Lay out for me the steps whereby I go into a voting booth, vote green, and the genocide stops.
Let me pause. See, this is the talking point that blue dogs are using, where if you go and you vote green, that doesn't stop the genocide. I think that it's very obvious that people don't understand the strategy, or people like MEHDI do understand the strategy. But again, he is a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party. The idea, number one, is that you don't reward genocide. That's the number one. You don't reward genocide. Number two, that is a way for you to use your vote as some sort of leverage. And number three, this is not just about this election. This is about building a third party movement. Jill Stein and Kshama Sawant have gotten together for a collaboration. This is why they're traveling across the country. They've been having these talks or whatever. They were out to the DNC convention, protesting there, giving several speeches. Jill Stein and Kshama Sawant are building something bigger. So after November, this doesn't stop just as like, okay, well, the presidential election's done. So whatever. That's not the end of it. So Kshama Sawant, former city councilor of Seattle, fought on the ground before she became city councilor. She knows how to win. They won the fight for 15, her and her organization, Socialist Alternative. Like, she won against Amazon, which is very hard to beat. So Kshama Sawant decided not to run for city council again. She's been in city council for a long time, not to run again, and decided to start an organization called Workers Strike Back, where she's focusing on helping people like Chris Smalls try to unionize other Amazon warehouses, working on like helping people unionize for the workers. So what Kshama had always said was the reason why she was able to win in Seattle is because they started with people on the ground. They started on the ground and built a worker, movement first. And then she didn't decide to run. They voted and said they wanted her to be the one to run. So she knows how to win. So if you're just looking at this as what is going to happen in November, then you don't understand the strategy. As I've said multiple times before in the show, you have to build a third party movement. The Democratic Party wasn't always this powerful party. It was something that they built. So if you want to have consistency and longevity with third parties and you want them to grow and get bigger, you have to build it. And what's very clear to me is some people and some of these talking heads who think that I don't know that they have family members in the Democratic Party and they have family members that are politicians that work for the Democratic Party. Some of the people who claim to be independent media, these people are plants. These people, regardless if Donald Trump was running or not, their job is to keep you right where you are and to try to crush any opposition to the two-party system, not just to the Democratic Party. People got to be very much aware of this because I wasn't born yesterday. I don't call a lot of names on this show, but I got receipts. And so a lot of people need to understand that I know what's going on behind the scenes. And some people are walking in a path where all of a sudden the policies doesn't matter anymore. They just want to rub elbows with people who are big names and they want to rub elbows with other politicians. And they were plants to begin with. All of a sudden, these things don't matter. All of a sudden, taking corporate money is no big deal. How the fuck? People tell me, oh, how'd you go from supporting Bernie Sanders to supporting third party? Motherfucker, how you go from supporting Bernie Sanders, someone who wasn't taking corporate money, who supported Medicare for all, to supporting a neocon like Kamala Harris, who is backed by AIPAC and Dick Cheney? One of you moved to the right, but it wasn't me. Period. So pay attention to what is happening. Why do you guys think people are attacking Jill Stein so much? The same people who say your campaign's unserious. She's an unserious person. Why are you even here? If it's so unserious, why are they attacking her? You don't see them attacking Claudia De La Cruz like this. You don't see them attacking Cornel West this way. They're mainly coming after her. And why? Because she is surging with Muslim voters. I even know some black voters told me they're going to support Jill Stein now after they saw what happened on The Breakfast Club. That's why they're coming after her. So people can say whatever they want about me, but one of us decided to stick with the policies, and some of you motherfuckers decided to make some money. Let's continue.
I don't see that happening.
Clearly, we are creating a very organized coalition that is here for the long haul.
That's right. They were Democrats that were sending cops to campuses to beat up kids on my campus, okay? Coming in riot gear to remove people from encampments.
Yeah. When people were dying en masse from COVID, when he was praising Nazis, doing domestic terrorism, as Butch says, did you ever at any point say, maybe I got that one wrong?
Oh, no.
You said in November 2015, as Assad and Putin were massacring Syrians in their tens of thousands, quote, the US should be working with Syria, Russia, and Iran to restore all of Syria to control by the government. That's the Assad government.
That was an unapproved statement, which was taken down the moment it was.
You seem to have a lot of things online that you don't approve. Would you?
So do you, MEHDI. So do you. Right? So everybody knows, like when people run, a lot of times they're not managing the social media accounts. A lot of times they have a team that does that, right? So MEHDI, let's not talk about people putting up things that they didn't approve. Let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about that, MEHDI. See, people think that because he got fired from MSNBC because he was standing up for Gaza, people are like, yeah, he's a fighter and da-da-da. No, that motherfucker's still a Democrat shill. He was good on Gaza, but he's still status quo on everything else. And don't get it twisted. Do not be fooled by these commentators that have left corporate media and started their own thing. They are still shills. They are still status quo. That's your Don Lemon. That's your MEHDI Hasan. Mark Lamar Hill, I look at you sideways too sometimes, bruh. Because you were talking about Gaza every damn day. And the moment that Kamala Harris said she was running, you jumped right on that train. So I'm giving you a side eye too, but I'm not going to put you in the same line with them. All of them. They're status quo. Bill O'Reilly, oh, I left a corporate media. Now no, you still status quo. Chris Cuomo, you still status quo. All of a sudden you act like you got some epiphany because you're part of News Nation and you're not a part of CNN. News Nation is still corporate. It's owned by Nexstar. But all of a sudden you're like, it's not about right. It's not about left. Man, please. You see how people get back into these spaces? And I said this to myself. How is it that this man got fired for sexual harassment, sexually harassing multiple women, and also the situation with his brother where he gave him inside information when he was working at CNN? You get fired from CNN. He got a job like that with News Nation. And all these people now try to say like, well, you know, it's not about left or right, but I think we should. All them playing that same game. Well, you know, I'm not a part of corporate media anymore, so I'm not. No, you are still status quo. Let's continue.
Unapproved statement, which was taken down the moment it was.
You seem to have a lot of things online that you don't approve. Would you tell your supporters at home, vote green everywhere, but in those 3 swing states, vote against a domestic terrorist?
I would say.
Yeah, so you don't get to say everything, see everything, because he put it behind a paywall. But I will say this. Why would she fight so hard to get on the ballot if she wanted you to stay at home? Again, but you guys said she wasn't a threat, right? I love this from Nick. Nick said this in response to MEHDI. Acknowledging that there is a genocide in Gaza, but still supporting the party committing the genocide makes you the most morally bankrupt person in politics. And for some people, this is not their thing. Like there are people I know that they're not into foreign policy. They're not focused on Gaza. They're just focused on who can fix things right now, right here in front of them. And like I said, those aren't the people I'm coming at. I'm coming at the people who were talking about it and said genocide is a red line, and all of a sudden it's no red line. Those are the people I got beef with. Those are the people that I can go into the ring with, right? Now I want to show you the difference. You saw the way that he spoke to her. Watch the way he spoke to David Sirota.
In the most recent primary cycles, we've seen AIPAC, for example, the very powerful pro-Israel lobbying group, managing to oust 2 very progressive members of Congress, 2 critics of Israel, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush. I think they spent something like $23 million in those 2 races combined, more than many foreign countries spend on their entire elections in these 2 districts. What do you think the Democratic Party can do, should do in response to groups like AIPAC almost buying elections, some might argue?
Not just almost, they are buying elections. And so, but this is the party he wants you to support. He still wants you to stay in this system. MEHDI Hasan.
It's a really difficult quandary. I think first and foremost, there needs to be public financing of elections. Bernie Sanders mentioned this at the Democratic Convention. It seems like a pie in the sky idea, but it is fundamental to our democracy, which is to say, there should be a way for people to run for office where they can have adequate resources to run a serious political campaign, and adequate resources that aren't from private sources that are coming with the expectations of government favors. Right now, because of the master plan, the deregulated campaign finance system forces candidates to rely on private sources and allows essentially billionaires and wealthy special interests to buy these elections. And public financing of elections has passed in other states. It's been supported by Democrats. If you want to make a more level playing field, it's not going to be perfect, but a more level playing field, this is essential.
So notice how he spoke to David Sirota, right? And they're right about having free elections and not have people pay for these things or have to go out and get donor money, but they don't have to. Like Jill Stein's grassroots, Bernie was grassroots. Look at the way that he spoke to Jamal Bowman.
If you are a progressive, you are a young person, you are a person of color who cares about foreign people, you are a Palestinian American, a Muslim American, Arab American, especially in somewhere like Michigan, and you watched last night's debate, and you saw Harris and Trump argue over who loves Israel more, and no one's saying they're going to hold Israel to account or stop the genocide. What would you say to that person who says, Congressman, why would I vote for either of them? They're both equally bad on this subject.
Yeah. First, I would say I understand completely because you have been made to feel invisible and have been erased. So I understand.
So do you guys see the difference? He said, what would you say to those people who said, I don't want to support either one of those candidates? Notice how calm he was with Jamal Bowman. Notice how calm he was with David Sirota. Now, it's funny that you said that to Jamal Bowman, MEHDI Hasan, because you had someone sitting right in front of you who was the alternative candidate, who was the candidate that is correct on that issue. But no, you decided to scream at her. So you're not serious either. This is what they scared of, folks. They keep saying, oh, she's not serious. It's no big deal. No one cares. Why are you doing this? Apparently somebody cares because look, some Muslim voters in battleground states moved to Jill Stein. And again, I told you about the numbers, but I want you to see it here for yourself. 35% for her in Arizona, 17% for her in Georgia, 13% for her in Nevada. 40% for her in Michigan. She's destroying Kamala Harris in Michigan among Muslim voters. So I guess Kamala just gave up there. It was like, nope, I'm not going to try to get this. I don't think Kamala trying to get this group back. 25% Muslim voters in Pennsylvania, 44% Muslim voters in Wisconsin. So Jill Stein is getting a significant amount of support from Muslim voters. And this is what they're really afraid of. Then you have this group here that's undecided, which they may not decide till election day. You never know. Pretty interesting. Now, what's strange is for some reason, Donald Trump is polling higher with Muslim voters in Nevada and Michigan than Kamala Harris. So I don't understand that. But in Michigan, Donald Trump has 27%. Nevada, 27%. Kamala has 26%. In Michigan, Trump has 18%. Kamala has 12%. So I don't understand. I don't know what that's about. But it's something that's happening there. When people say, why the Green Party got to do this every 4 years. The Green Party runs candidates on the local level too. I've interviewed them on the show. There's a group of them that will be coming back on. I think it's the first week of October. They run them on the local level too. You just don't know about it because they don't have the funding and the resources. And even a lot of people in independent media won't even interview them. And I know because they've reached out. A lot of these people are Democrat shills. They're mouthpieces for the Democratic Party. And let me find out some people getting paid. Because I like to find out things. So let me find out some people getting paid to do bidding for the Democratic Party, the people who said don't support these corporate people. So people say, why the Green Party come every 4 years? And it's a party. Why does the Democratic Party come every 4 years? Why does the Republican Party come every 4 years? It's a party. Rome puts this all into perspective.
AOC and the Democratic Party is currently trying to use projection as a weapon to attack Dr. Jill Stein and the Green Party. And yes, I said.
Sorry about that.
AOC and the Democratic Party is currently trying to use projection as a weapon to attack Dr. Jill Stein and the Green Party. And yes, I said projection because one of their main talking points is, how come you always come out every 4 years? Even though she didn't run 4 years ago, how come you only come out every 4 years to run for the president? And isn't that exactly what Democrats and Republicans do? Isn't that exactly what they do? They run for office. We get them in power and they ignore us for those 4 years and then run again. We get them back in power and then they ignore us for 4 more years until they want to put their best friend up to the bat next. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys are old enough to remember when Obama said this. I remember Joe Biden even running on it. And now you have Kamala Harris running on the same exact policy that they promised you, not 4, not 8, but for 51 years.
Codifying Roe v. Wade into law. They've been running on this same policy every damn time. So people need to ask that question. When you wonder why some of us are supporting other parties, maybe you did ask your whack ass party why they've been running on the same policy every time and never get it done.
51 years and they still haven't got this passed. And I know your guys go to, it's the House, it's the Senate. They can't get past these people because they're sexist, they're racist. Why are they running on policies that they know would never get past these people? Are they lying to you? Now, a great handful of these policies that they are running on, they could just pass with an executive order with the swipe of a pen, but come on now. But let's be honest. If they really wanted you to have it, they would just bypass Congress, right? Because it's not like we haven't seen nothing like that before.
The Biden administration once again bypasses Congress on an emergency weapons sale to Israel. So do you see how when they want to get something done, they get it done? If they wanted to stop sending weapons to Israel, they could get it done. You know who called off, fighting from Israel? Ronald Reagan did. You know what he did? He picked up the phone and said, stop bombing Lebanon. It can be done. When they tell you that they're trying to get a deal on the table, they're bullshitting you. All Kamala and Biden have to do is pick up the phone. Can't fall for the okie doke. We haven't even gotten to November yet. There will be more attacks on Jill Stein because I think she's more popular this time around than she was in 2016. But instead of attacking Jill Stein, what you should be doing is attacking your own damn party. For those of you who are attacking Jill Stein or Cornel West or Claudia De La Cruz and saying, how dare you people run outside of the two-party system and try to mess things up for the Democratic Party, maybe you should contact your politicians and the Democratic Party and ask them, how dare you run on the same policies over and over that you know that you can't pass? How dare you not accomplish anything all these years that you've been in office? How dare you not have a platform that energizes the base? How dare you not have a reparations plan, Kamala? How dare you not have a plan for younger people who don't have kids? It's all about child tax credit. What about the rest of us? We want to live too. How dare you continue to take money from AIPAC, from the Israeli lobby? Those are the people that you need to hold accountable. So instead of pointing your fingers at us, you need to point your fingers at your politicians for being so lazy and getting too comfortable with the lifestyle that they've developed being a politician that they forgot who their constituents were. That's who you need to talk to. Let's go to the comments and then we'll roll out of here. Thank you, Sparky. I'd much rather, I did that one already. Okay, here we go. Thank you. Sabby, saw you on Bad Faith with Brianna. You both did great, but I was surprised that you two kept your composure and didn't get into a fight over me. Oh, Sparky. Thank you, Brian. Look up MEHDI, a group that tricks Arab voters. They work with AIPAC. MEHDI is sponsored by them. MEHDI CEO, while a U.S. Syrian demon who lobbies to balkanize Syria and starve Syria. Make an episode. Oh, I didn't know about that. Thank you, New York Varsity. This is the same guy who trashed the Daily Mail, citing right-wing extremism. 2 days later, the Mail posted a letter MEHDI wrote to them begging for a job, promising to criticize the left. Weasel. Wow. Thank you, Lily. Love the integrity in your reporting and commentary. Brilliant. It's a new era. Lady Liberty is returning. Thanks, Sparky. Sabby. Haiti has been exploited and kept down by the U.S. at least since Democrat hero Woodrow Wilson. Americans who don't know this shameful history have no right to complain about Haiti or Haitians. Yeah, no, I've talked about Woodrow Wilson on here before. Thank you, Nyamal. I bought $75 worth of Green Party merch after the Breakfast Club interview and AOC ran her mouth. And now $5 because you're being so real. Oh, thank you, Nyamal. And thanks, Dwayne, Mark Lamont Shill. There you go. Let me get the comment on Rumble. Rumble. Thank you, Saka Papa. What does integration really mean? And why is that term only brought up when talking about people from the global South? Well, integration is also mentioned for Black people and white people too in the US. But the idea is that you integrate and everybody come together and, you know, just like a nice old big chicken pot pie. Everybody comes together like a chicken pot pie. All right, guys, that is it for me tonight. It is way past my time. I'll be live again tomorrow night, so stay tuned for that. I know that I haven't had a Sunday show in a minute. I've had other things on Sundays, but this Sunday I will be, I think, just getting back from Maine, so I won't have one this Sunday either. I'm sorry, guys, but next week we'll get back into that Sunday action again. All right, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me. You know how we do this here. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.